A funny thing happened to William and Stanley on their way to college.
At what point did you shoot the clerk?
They got framed for murder.
Whoa! Wait a minute!
Now, two kids from New York are in deep trouble.
It's time to make your phone calls.
The clan's here. They're inbred. They sleep with their sisters.
In the deep South.
Some of them do.
And only one man can save them.
We need to call an attorney, a great attorney.
He's not your typical hero.
We got an attorney in the family. Great, who?
He's
My Cousin Vinny. You stick out like a sore thumb around here.
Oh, yeah, you blend.
You graduated from law school 6 years ago. What have you been doing since? Studying for the bar. That's a lot of studying. What's this over here?
You never heard of grits?
Sure. I just actually never seen a grit before.
It's his first case.
Now, didn't I tell you dress appropriately?
You were serious about that?
The way you handled that judge, oh, you're a smooth talker, you are.
It's their last chance.
The two Utes.
Did you say utes?
Yeah, two Utes.
What is a ute?
But with Vinny's style,
I wore this ridiculous thing for you.
Vinny's girlfriend,
We agreed to get married as soon as you won your first case. My biological clock is ticking like this, and the way this case is going, I ain't never getting married.
they're dead meat.
May I have permission to treat Miss Vito as a hostile witness?
You think I'm hostile? Now wait till you see me tonight.
Joe Pesci is My Cousin Vinny.
You two know each other?
Yeah, she's my fiancée.
Well, that would certainly explain the hostility.
Ciao people, and welcome to our 156th episode of Gold Standard, the Oscars movie podcast, where we travel through time, reviewing the films that earn their gold statue, or standard if you will, and beyond. I am one of your co-hosts, DJ Nick. And as always, joining me in the Gold Standard Theatre are my two podcasting partners in crime. On one side, the professional nerd herself, Rachel Friend. Hey Rachel, how's life treating you today?
Not bad, not bad. If you are a fan of grits, yes, lots of butter, always. But if you want to change things up a little bit, try your grits with cheese on them.
I will definitely take that advice. I have never had grits, even though I have been to the South multiple times. So I guess that's on my list next time I visit the good old US of A. And on the other, the Ghostwood girl, Zan Sprouse. Hey, Zan, how are you?
Just remember, they take 20 minutes to cook them. So I'm good. No, I'm good. I'm excited to be talking about this movie. I have a lot of good memories of this one, and it's highly quotable, and it has a really great female character, and I'm excited to talk about it.
Yes, indeed. And speaking of great female characters, ladies, making her debut on the podcast to bring her film selection to the Gold Standard Theatre today is Miss Noelle Wilson. Hey, Noelle, how are you? And welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here with you guys and talking about this movie. So many great quotes. And, fun fact, I am born and raised in Brooklyn. Sometimes when I get really excited, I'm an actor. They beat those accents out of you. But when I get really excited about something, sometimes I slip right back in. So it may turn into a total Tomei takeover at some point. So I just apologize in advance for that.
That is wonderful, for sure, and we look forward to it. So today, of course, dear listeners, we are reviewing My Cousin Vinny, selected by Noelle. This was directed by Jonathan Lynn. It was written by Dale Lorna, while the score was by Randy Edelman. And an estimate to today's money, adjusted for inflation, this movie cost $30 million to make and made $175 million at the box office. It was released on March the 13th of 92 and has a runtime of roughly 2 hours. So, Noelle, starting with you, as you are our guest today and you're the bringer of today's movie, what are your general thoughts and impressions on My Cousin Vinny?
I mean, listen, My Cousin Vinny, I remember seeing this movie as a kid in the theaters. I know it has an R rating, but I think we all know why. And, I'm from Brooklyn. I'm from an Italian family. This was, swear words were no shocker to us. I know Nick and we had been going back and forth, and believe it or not, my husband was on a work trip and a train came through in the middle of the night with its horn blasting. And I immediately was like, oh my gosh, did you go down to the desk clerk and ask them? And did they tell you it never comes through at 4? And then the next morning it came through at 5. And did you go back and ask them? And they told you that it was of course, it was the wrong time the other day. It was all I could think of was that train quote. And of course, lots of other quotes. And this movie is just, I don't know, this movie is so special to me because it's fun. And I think it's extra special as an actor of a certain age, a woman of a certain age, because Marissa Tomei is actually not that much older than me. And she's from Brooklyn. And she went to a high school that I used to go by all the time. And when she won, it was such a big deal for me, for all the people around me at the time. I just remember, and I remember her getting razzed. I went back and I rewatched her Oscar acceptance.
Win.
And yeah, and it was just so fun. And I feel like I always come back to this movie and Ralph Macchio, I grew up with Karate Kid, and this was like, I feel like this movie, if memory serves, there had been like a big gap for him. And then he was back with this, and it was so cool to see him in like a new kind of role, and also, a role that wasn't the hero. And I don't know, just rewatching this movie, I laughed. I thought there's so many great little tidbits. There's so many great quotes. I think her wardrobe should be credited as a character itself. And yeah, I mean, I'm excited to talk about it with you guys. So thank you for having me and letting me pick this Oscar-winning film for Marissa Tomei. Yeah.
Well, we're very, very happy. I know the excitement was very real when I let both Zan and Rachel know this was what we were going to be talking about next. And speaking of you, Zan, what are your thoughts on this film?
I do like this movie as a northerner. I mean, I'm not from Brooklyn, but I am from the northern. I'm above the Mason-Dixon line. I always enjoy something that sort of pokes fun at the, how do I want to put this, less than savory aspects of the southern part of the United States, mainly being their less than thorough justice system. And similarly to another movie we've done on this podcast, In the Heat of the Night, you have cops and judges and lawyers that are very anxious to just convict the first person they see for this crime, regardless of their guilt. But at least with this movie, we don't have the seeming corruption that we would get in other movies. We have officials that will admit when they are wrong. And so it does poke fun at the South in a way that I think the South needs to examine, but not in a cruel way. And it's an interesting examination of Southern prejudices without being racially motivated, because we forget that prejudices are all different things, and the South is not just prejudiced against people of color. It's very, what are you doing down here, Yankee? The fact that they're, calling him Yankee all the time. And so I always found that amusing with this movie. I love seeing Joe Pesci in a comedic role, but still being Joe Pesci. The Joe Pesci we all know and love, and everything we love about Joe Pesci, but still comedic. We're not just laughing. What am I funny to you? Yes, you are. You're funny to us in this movie. And Fred Gwynne is always adorable to watch. And, growing up with Fred Gwynne as Herman Munster, seeing him in anything else is always entertaining. This is nowhere near as entertaining as his role in Pet Sematary, but it's still pretty good. And listening to him and Joe Pesci go back and forth with, accents and vocabulary and two Utes and all of that is adorable. And, even our interesting misunderstanding that we have about, what happens in prison is funny without being necessarily homophobic, I think. So I think it does a really good job at poking fun at things without stooping too low. And I can't say enough good things about Marissa Tomei. I'll talk more about that when we talk more about Mona Lisa Vito. But she really was fantastic in this. And I'll talk more about the climate of Marissa Tomei from the time, and just how good she is in this movie and how great this character is.
Oh, I'm sure there'll be a lot to say about that, about Mona Lisa Vito for sure. And Rachel, what did you make of this one? I'm sure you've watched this one multiple times, seeing as you quoted it.
Yeah. I love this movie. I realized as I was, kind of refreshing that I think I have a fondness for, I guess it would be like a subgenre of film, and that is courtroom. But then not all. I mean, when you think courtroom, you think courtroom dramas. Something more akin to like Law and Order, crap like that. Which they do have their place, but I also like courtroom stories that have some humor too. Like I see some parallels to this, and granted, it's a small percentage of that film, but like the final third of Legally Blonde. There's some some cut from a similar cloth. I also like 12 Angry Men, and which we need to do at some point. And there's this great courtroom movies out there. I think it tickles the part of me that wanted to be a lawyer for like half a second and then realized just how boring actually it can be, which, so Vinny falls asleep at one point. It just goes to show you just how not like Law and Order a lot of legal stuff is. But I mean, it's so well written. It is so well cast. It's a drama without being too overly dramatic, but it's funny without taking it seriously. Because you are talking about we as from the outside as viewers, we know these guys are innocent, but how are they getting to the point where they can get out of this? Is to be determined. And the thing is, there's not really like a bad guy or an antagonist. It's the law and the circumstances that is really pushing this whole thing along. And it's so well done. It's extremely legally accurate, actually. And all the car stuff is accurate too. Between the director and the writer, being our director has legal experience, our writer or scriptwriter was a car guy, and did his due diligence as far as like trying to make this as legally accurate as possible. Which you don't have to know that to appreciate it, but once you know that, I think it makes you appreciate it even more.
I 100% agree. And to piggyback off what you just said there, Rachel, there is something unexpectedly precise about this film. Because on the surface, it does look like one kind of movie, and then it quietly turns into another, because it begins with the energy of a broad comedy, almost chaotic in places. But underneath that, it's strangely disciplined. I mean, the humor doesn't come from randomness so much as observation, different ways of speaking, different assumptions, small misunderstandings that become enormous once they're placed under pressure. And what I think stands out is how patient it is. It lets situations breathe. It trusts timing. It allows awkward pauses, repetition, tiny details that seem incidental until suddenly they matter. A lot of comedies rush toward punchlines, but this one seems interested in process. And that gives it, I think, a texture that feels more grounded than exaggerated. And I think there's also an affection in it. It pokes fun, as Zan was saying, at institutions and habits and regional differences and confidence itself, but it rarely feels cynical. It seems to believe that competence can appear in unexpected forms, and that appearances are often misleading. And that idea keeps surfacing in very quiet ways. And then there's the craftsmanship. The structure is tighter than people sometimes remember. Information appears casually, circles around, and returns with purpose. And I think the movie makes difficult things feel effortless, which is usually a sign that a lot of care went into it. And what I like most is that it doesn't ask to be treated as important. It's content to entertain. Yet by taking everyday details seriously, it ends up becoming sharper and more memorable than a lot of films aiming for something grander. It does feel, I think, like one of those films that earns its reputation not through spectacle, but through confidence and rhythm and the pleasure of watching something know exactly what it is. So I definitely commend the filmmakers behind this and, of course, the actors, which we will talk about right now. So let's get to our characters on the board, starting with our boys who are accused of murder. We have the aforementioned Ralph Macchio as Bill Gambini and Mitchell Whitfield as Stan Rothstein. So Zan, starting with you, what did you make of Bill and Stan?
Oh, these two hapless idiots. I love the innocence that they have of thinking that a cop is going to follow them miles down the road for a can of tuna. I think that's kind of adorable. And the idea that that's why they're in trouble. You know, that they have no poker face, they can't lie, they just know they've been caught, they know they've stolen a can of tuna. And we don't really get a whole ton with these guys. You know, we have a little bit of them in the grocery, we have a little bit of them in the car, and then them back and forth, with the cops and in jail, and just how incredibly fast this snowballs on them, because they think, oh, okay, well, oh, I forgot to pay for the tuna. Uh-oh, should we go back? I don't know. It's like, it's a can of tuna. It's, what is it, 1991? It's probably less than $1. It's just, all right, next time we'll pay it forward, whatever. But just how quickly it can spiral. And they are such a good reminder of, you are innocent until proven guilty. Let the cops prove that you're guilty. Don't give them any ammunition. And you very quickly get on the side of these kids, and you see the Southern law enforcement machine as the antagonist in this, because they have no idea what's going on, and they know that they stole a can of tuna. And when they say, no, wait a second, we stole this can of tuna, we didn't know what you were talking about, it's too late. And you're like, oh my God, just listen to these kids who think they stole a can of tuna. Like, do they, you have their car, do they have guns, do they have any? There's literally no other evidence besides the fact that they, yes, thought they were guilty of the crime they knew they committed, but they had no idea another crime was committed at all. And just even that scene where they're together and saying, why would everybody lie like that? Because again, this really is the perception of, Southern justice, is that they're more interested in getting a conviction than they are in getting justice. And this movie really plays up on that. And it's not just law enforcement. That attitude is the residents and the witnesses as well. We have the guy who says he was making breakfast in 5 minutes, but we know it was grits and it wasn't. And then we have the lady who needs new glasses, and everybody's so sure that someone different committed this crime. And these are different guys. You have, and I love what do they call him? Stein when he's Steen, or Steen when he's Stein, something like that. Like, they really don't, they have the New York Italian guy and the New York Jewish guy, and that is not something the South understands. And it's I gotta say though, it's difficult for me to like Mitchell Whitfield when I see him as an actor, because I'm so used to him being Barry Farber from Friends, and I hate Barry from Friends so much. So I'm like, who's that guy's? Oh, that's freaking Barry. Go back to Jennifer Grey and your dental practice. But yeah, these kids really are just sweet, innocent kids on their way to UCLA, going through the South because it's cold. What is it, January? Something like that. And they're just trying to avoid weather. They're going through the South, and they're seeing stuff that they've never seen before either. I did once take the Amtrak from Orlando to Washington, D.C. And when you go through the South, you see things you've never seen before as a Northerner. And you see some absolutely beautiful countryside, but it's very different. The United States was two countries at one time, and it still very much is in a lot of ways. Just things are different. And these two guys don't know how to handle the South, and the South doesn't know how to handle these guys. And, I love the Oh, we can get a lawyer. It's my cousin Vinny. They're calling their parents like, yeah, we're arrested for murder. It's going to cost a lot of money. We're still down here. I have no idea what to tell you about this. I need a lawyer. He's like, yeah, my cousin Vinny, he's a lawyer. And it's just, and that there have probably been all kinds of family gatherings where it's like, did you hear Vinny pass the bar? He's a lawyer. And nobody's really talking about that. Took him 6 times to pass the bar, and he's doing personal injury law, which is shorthand for uh, personal injury law. Usually shorthand to describe that. We call that an ambulance chaser. People who are like, were you hurt in an accident? Call us. If anybody knows the name Kevin Kurgis. There's personal injury attorneys are the ones that you see on late night television. Trying to
The Lionel Hutzes of the world.
The Lionel Hutzes of the world, exactly. No, money down. But so he's excited to have his cousin Vinny there, and they're gonna get some help. And of course, we have that. Like I said, it's kind of funny, the whole that all he knows is that there's sexual assault in prison. That's all Stan understands. And the idea that like somebody is just going to bring someone to their cell to sexually assault them, like that's the part of the process, just shows you how naive these guys really are. And that's the main thing about these guys, is that they're just incredibly, incredibly naive, which is an interesting thing for somebody my age who grew up with Ralph Macchio sort of being this hero character in The Karate Kid, which is, I think, what most of us know about Ralph Macchio from. It's the I think Ralph Macchio is fully aware that when he passes away, all the newspapers will say Karate Kid actor Ralph Macchio dead at 187 or however old he's going to be. So I never like to jinx anybody, so I always pick a number that is probably impossible. So here he is in this very much a supporting part, but very much still has the presence of a Ralph Macchio. If you like Ralph Macchio and you've never seen Crossroads, I highly recommend watching Crossroads. But yeah, they're just and they want to stick together and they want to stick with Vinny, but Vinny can't sleep. He's fallen asleep. He doesn't know how to dress. He kind of doesn't know how the law works. We'll talk more about that when we talk about Mona Lisa. And he just kind of doesn't know what he's doing. And you kind of get when they start losing faith in him, but you also think it's so sweet that they're like, I got to do something. Vinny's fallen asleep. I got to do something different. Also, shout out to Austin Pendleton as the public defender. Austin Pendleton is probably best known to Gen X as Doc Hopper's assistant in the Muppet movie. He's fantastic in that. He's also in one of my all-time favorite romantic comedies, What's Up, Doc? But he's just so perfect as that's not even a stutter. That's just like a nervous panic response. So, and just how immediately their faith goes back into Vinny. I want him. You're fired. That's such an adorable moment. And this is an interesting way of telling the story because the story is about Vinny and really the story is about Mona Lisa. But the title is My Cousin Vinny, and it's Ralph Macchio is whose cousin Vinny it is. So it sounds like this is going to be told from Ralph Macchio's perspective, but Bill's really kind of a supporting character in this, even though it is his murder trial and his death penalty sentence that are on the line here. Because as they figure out, the confession is that Bill did it and Stan didn't know anything about it, but he didn't want to tell him because he was his friend. And yes, that is the truth about the crime of stealing a can of tuna, but they did not murder anybody. This is also an interesting story where, spoiler alert, we actually don't find out who the real killers are. We know that there are suspects, but we never see them. We never see them go to justice or anything like that. But these characters are interestingly done in the fact that their future hinges on everything around them, but the story is not told from their perspective, really. So they're just kind of there to be stunned, innocent, and scared, and reacting in the ways that I think everybody is reacting to Vinny. They're sort of the audience that, they're like, oh my God, Vinny's going to lose this case. He's an idiot, blah, blah, blah. And when we start to lose faith in them, it's because they're losing faith in Vinny. And then when they get faith in Vinny again, so do we. So the feelings of the audience are very much in tune with the feelings of these two characters. But I think they both did a fantastic job. Again, this had been kind of a break for Ralph Macchio. We hadn't seen him in a while because, unfortunately for Ralph Macchio, when you get famous for being a character called the Karate Kid, and then you grow up, there's not a lot you can do there, you know. Um, so we'd had the Karate Kid Part 3 a couple of years before, but he wasn't really doing a whole heck of a lot. He's worked a lot, but it wasn't in anything Karate Kid level until, honestly, YouTube brought back Karate Kid. So, I love seeing Ralph Macchio. I love seeing him doing something different. I love seeing him do a role that is, yes, he's a graduated college student, but for Ralph Macchio, he was in his 30s when he made this movie, but it's still a little more age appropriate than being the Karate Kid, quote unquote. So I liked that for him. I thought that was great. But yeah, these are interesting characters because the whole story revolves around them with having very little of them in the actual movie.
That is an excellent point for sure. And I was very happy to see Ralph Macchio here. I was like, oh yeah, it's my boy, it's Danny. So I was very happy about that. And Rachel, what did you make of our two kids wrongly convicted?
Well, not wrongly convicted, because they do end up free. Wrongly accused. But I mean, yeah, you got these two guys. They're in college, so they're adults technically, but they're still not a lot of experience in the real world. I will say, of the two, I would say Bill is slightly more level-headed compared to Stan. Stan very much is like not one's slightly smarter than the other. Gets very flustered very easily. The fact that I believe he's the one that puts the can of tuna in his pocket. Which, who does that? He just wasn't paying attention to what he's doing, and then when Vinny shows up at the jail, and he thinks that he's there to like assault him, and he just it's a hilarious scene, just seeing his reactions to what Vinny is saying, because he's completely misinterpreted the thing, which, all things considering, Vinny would not normally be meeting his clients there in prison cell. He would be meeting them in an interrogation room or a meeting room. So I guess Stan has slightly some leg to stand on with his concern that there's this random guy showing up to their prison cell. But at the same time, the fact that that's where he took him is just like, I know they're in the South, and Deliverance had been out by the point this takes place, so I don't know. If it wasn't for Bill and having the smarts to be like, I got a cousin, he's in the he's a lawyer, which, being a lawyer is an awful lot like being a doctor. You have a specialty, and so the fact that they're in BFE South and are on the hook for murder and robbery, and he's just like it's like, oh, my cousin's a lawyer, and like, yeah, is he this type of lawyer? So, it's like, I got a friend he likes to say he's a recovering lawyer, even though he hasn't practiced in a long time, but his thing was like copyright, and like it was like business more, contracts and things like that. So these two, and the fact that that they lose, granted, they have some reason, some decent reasons to lose faith in Vinny's ability to save them, so they temporarily switch to a different lawyer, but they quickly switched back, which the only reason that he took that role was as a favor, because that the actor actually does have a stutter, and the problem was he was only getting roles where he played a character with a stutter. But these two, like Stan said, it's even they're the ones that kind of inadvertently kickstart this entire proceed, everything that happens throughout the film. It's really not about them. The movie is called My Cousin Vinny, and it's the per in this case it's Bill's cousin Vinny, but there's a reason Bill's name is not in the title. It's Vinny who's the one who's named in the title, because it's really about him and everything that occurs in the film. It just so happens that it's a cousin of his that pulls him into this entire thing. If it wasn't family, Vinny would have no reason to be there.
I very much think very well said indeed. And Noelle, what did you make of Bill and Stan?
Yeah, listen, I think, the point's been said so beautifully already by everyone else, but I Ralph Macchio in this film, he's so wholesome and charismatic that you're cheering for him from the start, from the moment they are, in the car, and then they're in the grocery store and they're pinching pennies, and like an old couple, Bill and Stan are arguing over the price of beans by a penny. And then he's like, "Oh, I need to get my protein." And it's like, yeah. You're rooting for him. Like, he's reasonable. He's down to earth. He's logical. And he's always, what I love the most about him is, like, through the whole movie, he's so calm. I think one of my favorite lines that continues to this day, all these decades later, to stick with me, is when the police are questioning him in the office, and the police say, "And that's when you killed the clerk." And he's like, "I killed the clerk? I killed the clerk?" And then it comes back to bite him in the ass, because we all know that when he said it, he was asking a question, but when it's read back, it says, "I killed the clerk, I killed the clerk." And, they're just, to everyone's point, they're just out to get him. Another, just a side note, something I really love about this film, and it's been brought up, is how, in the South, they are just by the law, and they are out to get these two guys. And yet it's so humorous how easily at the end, everyone is like, "Oh, I was wrong. Oh, yeah, I was wrong. Oh, yeah, I was wrong too." And then everything works out, which to me is beautifully part of this humor that's set up. But yeah, I too love that Stan has this neurotic impression. And yes, I also always see him as Barry and Friends, and equally, have to wash my mind of that. Um, but I do that scene where Vinny comes to the jail cell and he is just freaking out, and it's so beautifully, comically written that every line just has a double meaning, and we know it. It's such a beautiful example of the perfect kind of irony where the audience knows something that the character doesn't know, and it's so humorous. And a lot of this movie is like that. And then, Bill wakes up from his nap and just like is like, "Oh, it's my cousin," And I think another favorite part of mine with Bill is when Stan is like, "I don't want him. Like, he's done. Like, what are we gonna do?" And Bill's like, "Don't you remember at so and so's wedding, there was a magician, and Vinny called him every time, every time. No, it's in his pocket. No, it's on his thing." And he's just rooting for him. And like, just to bring that back to something that was said earlier about how the film is called My Cousin Vinny. And every poster, I was Googling while you guys were talking, the poster, every single poster is not just Vinny. It is Vinny and Mona Lisa, because we all know that in any great movie, in any great comedy, especially, you have to have a buddy that is there telling you you can do something when you feel like you cannot. And this whole movie is everyone telling Vinny he cannot. And she is there to tell him, "You can. I'm rooting for you. You can do this." I know we'll talk about them in a minute. But I don't know. I love Bill in particular. It makes me think back to, like, yes, I know we touched on the Karate Kid, but even further back into, like, The Outsiders, right? Like, I think a lot of people forget that, I mean, such an A-list, or what turned into A-listers of a cast in that movie. And he has that same wholesome, I don't know. There's something like lonely yet optimistic about him. And I think it tracks like from those early days into this movie. They crack me up. I think, at the end of the day, Bill and Stan, they're like this old married couple. They're going on a vacation and they get into trouble. And it's a lot of finger pointing when they're in the cell, but they come together eventually and they get out of it and it all works out. But yeah, I don't know. I love him. I as much as I want to hate Stan, you need him. You need him. And I think that the writing is solid, and that's why it works because none of them are caricatures. They're all characters with different relationships and different points of view, and I think that's what makes it work, and that's what makes it so real and relatable and funny.
I think that's very much why this film has stood the test of time compared to other of its contemporaries, for sure. And yeah, I see these two as an important part of why the film works tonally. Because Stan, I agree with you guys, feels like the more outwardly reactive of the two. He does carry a kind of escalating disbelief that gives the opening sections their energy. There is this sense of someone discovering, piece by piece, that ordinary assumptions no longer apply. And his anxiety often spills outward into frustration and confusion and attempts to make sense of things. And it's funny to watch, but there's also something recognizable in it. He reacts the way a lot of people might react if they suddenly realize that being innocent isn't the same thing as being safe. Bill, yes, does feel quieter and more contained. His stress reads very differently. Rather than constantly pushing against the situation, he often seems to absorb it. And I think that contrast makes the premise feel more human because people rarely respond to fear in the same way. And what I like is that the film doesn't turn either of them into symbols of innocence or endless panic. They still come across as young, imperfect, sometimes not especially composed. And I think their confusion creates a lot of the early comedy, but it also quietly establishes the stakes. If they were exaggerated into pure victims, the movie would become heavier. If they were only there for jokes, the tension wouldn't matter. So they're not the most, and of course they're not the most remembered part of this film, but I think they do an important job. They make the situation feel absurd and serious at the same time. And I think without them feeling believable, the rest of the film would have had a much harder balancing act to do. So very happy to see these boys for sure. So let's get to our titular character and his amazing fiancée. We have Joe Pesci as Vinny Gambini and Marisa Tomei as Mona Lisa Vito. So Rachel, starting with you, your thoughts on Vinny and Lisa?
Oh my. I mean, Vinny obviously is the titular character, but Mona Lisa carries a lot of weight in this. When the script was being written, I have to make sure to share some of these video links with Nick so he can put them, on social media so people can see them. Remember the guy's actual name. You probably see them on YouTube, Legal. He sat down and talked with Dale, the writer of the script, and he asked him, he's like, when you're writing the script, did you have any actors in mind? And the time was like, well, you're not really, because you can find yourself writing for that particular person, and if that person doesn't get cast, then the script is wrong. But when they went to sit down with the producers and everything, and they're like, do you have anybody in mind? And his first, because in his mind, Vinny was more like this. Vinny's background was going to be like, he's this tall, kind of, muscular, kind of rocky type, look to him, former boxer that's kind of changed careers and is now decided to become a lawyer, and that's why he's just now finishing law school and passing the bar at his age. So he had in mind somebody tall and very broad and looks like they could be an ex-boxer and could beat you up. And I think Pacino is who he had in mind. I think is who he name dropped. And the studio's like, not really. He's not the best box office draw, which is kind of funny considering Pesci was also kind of on a slump as far as box office was concerned. But somehow they got around to Pesci, and it's like he's so not, other than the dark hair, he's not like, Pesci is under 6 feet tall. He's not what he pictured, but he just had this kind of vibe about him that just kind of worked. That he's good at being intimidating without his physicality necessarily being part of it. I always say he filmed this not long after Goodfellas. He won the Oscar for Goodfellas, and this came out he was filming this right after winning the Oscar for Goodfellas. But he had done, some of it. He had done the first Home Alone at this point. And we'll go on to do Home Alone 2, among other things. Pesci just, for what he lacks, I say lack, like it's a bad thing, but what he does not have is physicality of maybe your more traditional, especially your New Yorker kind of badass, he makes up for in personality. He's very good about being very serious, but you're not sure if he's actually being serious or if he's messing with you. And then if he's joking, you're like, am I supposed to laugh at this? Yeah, we all know that scene from Goodfellas. Like, what, you think I'm funny? You think I'm funny like a clown? Is that. I think that, with his heavy New York accents, it just makes for a very interesting dichotomy, because you see with things like, so you see with some television shows and movies and stuff where, there's a courtroom, a trial of some sort involved, that we will see sometimes like the small town lawyer end up with a big case, way bigger than somebody of their practice might not ever be involved in their entire life. This is kind of the opposite. Instead of doing a small fish in a big pond, you've taken a fish from a big pond. Granted, he's not the experience, but he comes from New York, and puts him in Wazoo, South, which Wazoo doesn't exist. There is a Yazoo, though, in Mississippi, I think. And he's so green, he's so wet behind the ears, and that's not necessarily his problem. He's at when he they bring it up. I believe he's explaining it to Mona Lisa when they first get there, and it's like, if you're going to be a lawyer that works in the courtroom, a trial lawyer, you really do not get experience until actually you graduate law school, and you either get an internship somewhere or you just go to court and watch. They don't teach courtroom procedure in law school. So him not knowing some stuff is understandable. But it takes him a little bit to get some traction, and some of it is dumb luck. And but I mean, he does eventually find his footing, and we'll talk about the ending. But he ends up showing that he is a very smart and capable attorney. It's just there's a lack of confidence there, and I think that just comes from inexperience. And probably a little bit, the fact that he had to take the bar so many times probably has affected his self-esteem a little too, and his confidence in himself. But he is way smarter than I think he gives himself credit for, and I think he's also smarter than the people in this town give him credit for. I mean, we'll talk about the judge and the prosecuting attorney, but they see him as this big New York guy who probably thinks he's better than them, and they just make a lot of assumptions, and he ends up proving them wrong, and at the same time proving himself wrong. And I think proving to himself, I think what Mona Lisa always saw in him, as much as she digs into him and insults him sometimes, which he gives it back to. It's like, their strange way of flirting with each other. I think Mona Lisa sees the potential in him and really wants to support him, but at the same time, she's not going to baby him. She's a grown-ass woman, he's a grown-ass man, and they're going to conduct themselves like the grown-ass adults that they are. And she's not going to take any shit, from any of the people in this town, and not from him. She may be his girlfriend / fiance, and they've been together for so long, and she may, she throws that fit about it's like my niece is getting married before me, and my biological clock is ticking, which is not really a thing. That is a social construct. Are there some women who maybe feel like time is passing them by? Yes, but the whole biological clock thing, not actually a thing. I would know. I don't have one. Which, it's funny, especially watching this now, and seeing Marissa Tomei then and seeing her now, and it's like, when they're having that moment where Vinny is trying to go through everything, and she's just pacing, and she's in that like amazing floral like one-piece jumpsuit thing that fits her like second skin, and then like other than the hair, she has not changed any. That body still rocks in the year of our Lord 2026, and this was in 1992. So, when you got a woman like that, Vinny, you would have locked that kind of woman down. But at the same time, it's like, the law school was something he wanted to pursue, and while she does, poke him a little, she's very supportive. She's reading some of the material. She's telling him some of the information, some of the procedural things, and some of the things that he just stuff isn't clicking for him or whatever. And we talked about the ending. She's also extremely intelligent. Yes, she's gorgeous. She's got that strong accent of hers, but behind all that is someone who's extremely intelligent, very observant, and she may not know everything, but what she does know, she knows. And that turns out to be, did she have to come along with Vinny to this? No, but she did, and it ends up being a blessing for not just Vinny, but his clients as well. It's her encyclopedic knowledge of all things automobile that ultimately, saves the day, and it saves his clients from going to jail. Marissa's absolutely fantastic in this, and that, you know, her expertise, on the stand as an expert witness, is just absolutely one of the most brilliant, you know, moments in a courtroom drama. You know, that's it's up there with, you know, Tom Cruise, you know, antagonizing Jack Nicholson in A Few Good Men, and it's Ella Woods, you know, getting figuring out the whole perm thing in Legally Blonde, that ends up being the defining moment of the case, and turns things. So, you know, the Dale, the scriptwriter, you know, he's like, he's like, you know, I wanted it to, he wanted it to be as accurate as possible as far as the legalities and the law and everything is concerned, but at the same time, he's like, I'm fully aware that people expect certain, like, hits and things to happen in courtroom dramas. So he's like, I had to figure out a way to get that in there. And one of those is really, you know, a real tense and kind of like grab everybody's attention moment of somebody on the stand. And she absolutely earned every inch of that Academy Award with that scene. You know, we've talked about this before with other films, that sometimes there are certain, it's not the film as a whole, but certain scenes, or be like, that's why they gave the award. And that scene is why she earned that Academy Award.
Indeed, yes. I think, you know, to quote our supporter Aaron, I'm sure when folks watch this, like, I think I just saw Marisa Tomei win her Oscar as soon as they saw that moment. So I could definitely see that. And Noelle, what did you make of our betrothed?
I mean, it doesn't get much better than these two for me. I think someone brought up earlier that, you know, just to talk about Vinny first, there are moments where you see the Joe Pesci you're expecting to see, right? Like when he when he comes out of that cabin in his underwear and is shooting the gun wildly at what turns out to be an owl. You know, it's very much the quintessential Joe Pesci that people love, from any mobster mafia movie. And I feel like there's a whole generation of people who know him from Home Alone, and they hate him, you know. And it's funny because to me, I'm one of those people. I hate him. It's a testament to his acting. You know, his character is so despicable in Home Alone, and that's kind of what stays with you. But then you see him in this movie, and you kind of like him immediately, you know. And there's something so charming about him, even though he's not the most attractive, and he's not the tall drink of water. And he's, you know, it's interesting to hear about, you know, the casting choices that were thrown around, or the casting wishes, I should say. And I think what I love so much about him in this film and this character, and it's a testament to the writing and a testament to the acting and the directing, is that, like, he's never disparaging to other people, for as much as they disparage him with the way he talks and they ridicule the way he dresses. And yet he never really gives it back. He does, you know, hit a breaking point, and he does, as we all do, you take it out on the person who's closest to you. At some point, he starts yelling at Lisa towards the end. But he knows his lane, and he has the lane that he's in and he's good at, right? Like when he defends her with the guy who hustled her, you know, and he's like, excuse me, no, we're going to take care of this. And there's never anything happens because he knows, he's so confident, and you love that about him. And then there's the lane that he wants to be in, which is like, I'm the tough guy, but I'm also really smart, but I'm not quite there yet. But I want to be in that lane. And you see his insecurities, and they come through so beautifully. And even, you know, with his clothes, you know, like by the end when he's in that tux and he's like, Your Honor, you told me not to come in this courtroom not dressed. But you know what happened? My suit's in the mud, and we went to get a new one, but the whole store has the flu. The whole store, which I was dying. And so I promised you. And so this is the best I could do. And it's like, even the judge is like, Okay, okay. He's so. I mean, I've been jotting down notes as you guys are talking, and it's like, um, he and it also the other thing too with that regard is it's almost as if you imagine him. It's like he has the best poker face. He will never let you see his cards. Like with the whole running gag of his credentials. Well, what have you won? Oh, win some, lose some. The moment when the judge is like, I called and they've never heard of so and Mr. Gallo, and he's without missing a beat and without poking fun or leading the audience, he's like, Gallo? No, 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 no. I said Callow. And it's just a testament to the writing and his acting. Everything that is set up in this film has a payoff. Like there is nothing wasted. There is no material left on the ground. Everything went into the dress. And it's brilliant. I mean, from her opening with her taking the photos, which we don't realize, and her knowledge of the car and the setup of the grits, and then getting stuck in the mud, which, in her Oscar-winning scene of if you're, anyone from Alabama, if you've been stuck in the mud, that if you press the foot on the gas, one tire is going to spin and the other's going to do nothing, and it's perfect. Everything is set up throughout that whole movie, and they perfectly complement each other to the very end. I mean, I rewatched the ending, which I know we will talk about. But right to that very ending, everything is just like set up, call back so beautifully. And it's a testament to like textbook writing almost, in that everything that can go wrong for this guy goes wrong for this guy. From the suit and from his attire to the car getting stuck in the mud to them not being able to a good night's sleep until he's locked up, which to me is hilarious that he could, sleep through that raid at the prison, and yet he's sleeping like a baby. And yeah, I just, and of course I mean, I think her wardrobe should have, and I'm sorry, I did not look up. It's not like me. I should have looked up who the costume designer was, because the costumes were just phenomenal. And I'm still going to go back and look that up. Because she, to your point, is the same now as she was then. And it's incredible. And I mean, in some ways I want to hate her and kill her, but she's from Brooklyn and I love her, so I'll give her a pass. But her character as well is just so smart, and they're both so unassuming. They have this pride about like, this is who we are. Like when he says to her, well, what do you do? And she says, I'm an out of work hairdresser. No, like no apologies. That's what I do. And this is where I am. Take it or leave it. And her credentials, with all the mechanics and her family and what makes her such an expert. They complement each other so beautifully, and it's so fun. And I realized that she was up for that Oscar with like four other British actresses in very, very serious roles, very serious. And yet she won. And I think it's just a testament to how the movie and her character and her role was so funny because it was sincere. They never make fun of these characters. They are who they are. Someone beautifully said it earlier, how there's just no apologies. Like everyone in this film speaks a different language, even though we're all speaking English. They have a different point of view. They have a different way of doing things. And I just, they're just my favorite. They're just my favorite. And yeah, and her jumpsuits. I really do feel like the jumpsuits really should just like have their own exhibit in some museum somewhere, because they're perfect. And that gray streak in her hair, which I will never forget.
It is absolutely gorgeous. So I guess we definitely have to thank Carol Wood, who was the costume designer for this. And yes, she went to do this, My Bloody Valentine, and a couple of others, of course. But yes, Carol was on point when it came to dressing Marisa for sure. And Zan, what did you make of Vinny and Lisa?
These are great characters for all of the reasons everybody's already talked about. There is an honesty and a pride in these characters. They are what they are. And I think that goes across everyone in this, because like I said before, even the Southern caricatures aren't that caricature-y. And for them, the Brooklyn caricatures aren't that caricature-y. This is just what they are. This is in 1991. This is what Brooklyn looked like. This is what the South looked like. And it was different. And that's really the only point they're trying to make. And the humor comes from not the caricatures, but how the two interact with each other. You know, how the two examples, I guess is a good way of putting it, would interact with each other. And so there is a real, this is who we are, and there's no reason to be ashamed of it or hide it. And like you said, even in that scene where he's like, I'm wearing this for you. I could either wear the leather jacket, which I know you don't like, or I could wear this. So I'm wearing this. And he's realizing I'm in someplace different. Rules don't necessarily, I might be wearing a tie, but I'm wearing a leather jacket. It's different. And there's an understanding of a reverence for the fact that they are not in their house anymore, that there are some things they have to do, which is why we aren't making fun of grits when we're getting it explained to us. And we are talking about how, you know, stuck in the mud in Alabama knows you push on the gas, one tire spins, the other tire does nothing. They're just learning about their surroundings. And that's an interesting aspect of these two characters, that they're there to learn things because they are both incredibly smart characters. Vinny is, Joe Pesci's fantastic as this role because, yeah, we had seen him in Home Alone, so we'd seen him in some comedic roles, but the second you say Joe Pesci, everybody thinks, what, am I funny to you? And if you've seen Goodfellas, that sounds like a funny quote, but he kills that guy. He legitimately murders that guy at the table. This is a very, very scary character that he plays in that. Or just even his characters in Raging Bull, just very Italian guy, you know, he's done comedic stuff, other like Lethal Weapon, things like that, but he's always sort of Italian guy. And in this, it's not so much that, it's just guy that's different than his surroundings guy. And he could be anything, but the fact that it's Joe Pesci's good at what he does. And he is so well known for just being the Italian guy that it was brilliant casting for him. And he is very new at being a lawyer. And, you know, where he doesn't know that he is allowed to see the files on Discovery. He's thinking, oh, if I can just finesse him to give me my files. Dude, you are a lawyer. You are entitled to see this stuff. And he just doesn't know that because he's new at this. But the main thing about Vinny is that he's a character that proves that people can do anything if they've got somebody that believes in them. Because he has Mona Lisa, but he also has his mentor, his law professor that went to his graduation, who sort of saw him as a son and helped lie to the judge at the end of the movie. When we find out later that he does lie and say that, you know, Callow is an actual lawyer. But having someone believe in you can help you when you don't particularly have a lot of direction. And when we learn about Vinny and who he is in his past, you know, we have Bill talking about, you know, him calling the magician on everything he was doing and picking apart all of that. And then you hear Vinny talking about how he went to argue a traffic ticket and somebody said, you're good. You would be a good litigator. You know, just, you get the impression that Vinny kind of didn't know what he wanted to do in life. You know, he worked on cars, but it wasn't his main thing. And there was something, he needed some direction, and having someone believe in him and give him a path was extremely helpful for him. And now here he is, and he's a really good guy. He drove down there on his own dime, and you hear him say, you got me for free. What more do you want from me? Like, he's doing this as a family favor. And so you can tell that, you know, the people in his life really mean a lot to him. You know, whether it's his cousin, whether it's Mona Lisa, whether it's his law professor, whoever, the people in his life mean something to him. And so he might seem like on the surface, this really Joe Pesci tough guy character. He's really a very good guy and a very smart guy. And, you know, even when he has the argument with Mona Lisa, you know, I don't need this. I do not need this right now. Well, how much more shit can we pile on right now? He's not wrong. He's not wrong. He's basically telling her not to mention two kids whose lives are in the balance, and not to mention a little murder case. You know, if he can't figure out this murder case, his cousin is going to the electric chair. And, you know, they make it seem in this movie that, you know, as soon as he loses the case, as soon as they get convicted, he'll go to the electric chair. That's not how it works. But like Rachel was saying, you have to take some liberties with a courtroom drama. But he knows that he knows there's a lot going on. And even she's like, maybe it was a bad time to bring it up. And because that's not what we need to, we don't need to focus on her biological clock. And, he is trying to do the right thing by her. He needs to win a case. He's got to get a case, but he needs somebody to believe in him and give him a shot at it. And, this is a shot. And, not only does Bill believe in him, eventually Stan believes in him. And of course, Mona Lisa completely believes in him. And Mona Lisa is the best character in this movie. Hands down. Hands down. You're watching this movie for her. And let's go back to 1991 and the climate of Marissa Tomei. We pretty much knew Marissa Tomei from her role on A Different World, which was the Cosby Show spinoff, where the Denise character, the Lisa Bonet character, goes to college to Hillman, I think it was, a fictional HBCU, and Marissa Tomei is like the one white student there. And that's kind of what we knew her from, was from the sitcom. And then we'd seen her as one of the ensemble cast in the movie Oscar, which, I've talked about before, starring one of Nick and I's favorite actresses, Ornella Muti. But she was sort of the side character in comedies. And we've talked before about how the Academy does not like to recognize comedic performances or any sort of what we refer to as genre performances, horror, sci-fi, fantasy. The fact that we have Lord of the Rings Oscars is amazing to me because of that. But the Academy doesn't like to talk about comedies. And when she won this Oscar, now remember, Best Supporting Actress is very often given to a first-timer. But when she won this Oscar, people were talking about how it must have been that Jack Palance read the wrong name, because Jack Palance had won the year before for City Slickers and, famously did a one-handed push-up when he won his Oscar and was kind of sort of seen as a little bit out there. And they thought that what he had done was read the wrong name. Well, now we know, thank you very much, Moonlight and La La Land, that if the wrong name is read, they will correct you. But they thought, oh, they just didn't correct it because it would have hurt her feelings, or just they were trying to, save Jack Palance's image or something. No, she won this Oscar not just because she does a great performance, but she does justice to a character that is the true hero of this story. This case is won not just by her automotive knowledge, but by her being the one that bails him out of jail, being the one that reads the legal textbook so he knows that he can get the files on discovery. Throughout this entire story, she keeps saying, how can I help? How can I help? How can I help? And he keeps telling her she can't, not because he doesn't want her help, but because he doesn't know what to ask for. That's how far in over his head he is with this murder trial. And she takes it upon herself to figure it out and help him win this case. She not only helps Vinny win his first case so they can now get married, but she saves the lives of 2 kids. This character, we talk a lot about how female characters are there for the advancement of the male characters most of the time. And on the surface, Mona Lisa seems like that, but Mona Lisa is there for the advancement of this entire story, of literally every character that's in there, because she helps Vinny figure out how to be an attorney. She helps these 2 kids not get convicted of a murder. She helps their tire expert figure out his mistake. She gets his suit cleaned. She bails him out of jail. She does everything that is needed to make this the happy ending that we want it to be. It's all because of Mona Lisa. And it takes a minute to realize that about this, because at first she does seem like meanwhile, my niece, my sister's daughter, is getting married. And, and at this time, I ain't never getting married. It seems like she's just the stereotypical comedic Brooklyn girlfriend that just wants to be married. And what is that line in Saturday Night Fever? You kept talking about your one married sister and your other married sister, and I got the idea that all you wanted to be was another married sister. She seems like that type of character, but she's extremely smart and extremely capable. And she understands that maybe she's an out-of-work hairdresser who has worked as a mechanic, and she's not the attorney, but that doesn't mean she can't learn what she needs to learn to help somebody when they need help for it. the thing about being an attorney is that, and most professions, what you need to be able to do is learn how to do it. Now, there are some things that you need to have. You need to have that gift for being able to argue or being able to pick apart a situation. You need to be able to have that kind of attention to detail, because obviously Austin Pendleton was able to learn how to become a lawyer and take the bar and pass, but can he actually be a trial attorney and not be able to say anything? No, you can't. There are some things you need to be able to do. You need to be able to have the confidence to be in a courtroom and not get nervous and stutter your way through cross-examination. But all she did was just read the same books everybody else was supposed to read. And she learned what she needed to do. And she said, yeah, you're entitled to those on discovery, idiot. You should have been asking for that at the beginning. You didn't finesse anything by going hunting. She learns what she needs to learn to get done what needs to get done. She is a woman who gets things done. And she's a very, very impressive person. And like I said, with her, with her 90s outfit and her jumpsuits and her tight skirt and her poofy hair and super red lipstick and all of that. And there is a moment where you're sitting there thinking, like, Mona Lisa, really? These kids are going to die. Can you maybe just put aside your differences and just testify, please? When she's like, we answer the question. No, I hate him. I love that moment, but it's like, oh, they're going to die if you don't do this. Just her being able to take the right pictures. By the way, I had that camera when I was a kid. That is a brand of camera called Le Click. It was called Le Click, CLIC. And it was it was horrible. I'm surprised she got photos in the first place, because it was a disc film camera. Disc film that they don't even make anymore. It was a little disc cartridge that you put in, and you had to advance it. Well, not all the cameras advanced properly, so a lot of times you get your photos back and it looked like your Viewmaster got caught in between two slides. They were terrible cameras, but it's kind of exactly what somebody like her would have had. She probably would have gotten it at, Christmas 1989 or something, which is probably when I got mine. No, I think I got mine Christmas of 87. But still, I had that camera. Her taking the pictures and him going through like, oh, look, me in my underwear. Fantastic. I'm glad we have this photo. But she has the pictures that they need to see. She has the pictures that lead to the comparisons. She keeps saying, how can I help? But she's more than help. She's the partner. She's the partner he needs, doesn't necessarily always deserve, but she's the partner he needs. And she's the reason why everybody in this movie has their happy ending. Because even at the end, when the charges were dismissed, we still have the little issue where the judge is trying to figure out who Vinny is. And if she hadn't called his old law professor and say, please lie when you get a fax about this, he would have been in jail for impersonating an attorney, or giving false credentials. I mean, he is an attorney, but giving false credentials. So every happy ending in this movie is because of her. And, you're kind of glad for her that she gets her happy ending, because she and Vinny are going to get married. But I also wind up wanting so much more for her. I would love it if she and Vinny can get married, and either maybe she goes to law school also, or they take some money from him being an attorney and open her a hair salon, or whatever she wants to do. I hope she's able to find a way to do it other than being the support system for everybody, because she's so much more than that. She's not just a support system. She is a load-bearing beam for everybody. And she's just a wonderful character. Marissa Tomei did a fantastic job. And yeah, she did earn every gram of gold in this Oscar. I mean, when you take a look at who else was up for this, I mean, it is some great people. It's Vanessa Redgrave, Miranda Richardson, Joan Plowright, Judy Davis. These are serious roles. And then we have Marissa Tomei and My Cousin Vinny. It seemed like it stuck out like such a sore thumb. And all of these women do a fantastic job. If you have never seen Damage, oh, sweet Jesus, that is a movie that will put you through the ringer. Miranda Richardson is unbelievably fantastic in that, but in a different way. They're both, I think personally for me, the real contest was between these two women for the performances, for the amount they have to do and amount they, and contribution to the story. I think Richardson's is more emotional, but they're both extremely, extremely good on the same level when you really look at the story and really look at what they have to do. So I never had a problem with this one. I never was like, oh, whatever, My Cousin Vinny. No. Once you finally see this movie, you're like, oh, I get it. I get why she was recognized for this, because like I said, we often talk about how men, especially men, write female characters that are only there for the advancement of the male protagonist. But this character, the Mona Lisa, advances the entire plot. She advances everybody's lives and enhances everyone's character. And she's fantastic. I can't think of anybody more perfect to do this job, to do this performance as Marissa Tomei, because I feel like anybody else would have been maybe too caricaturish. You know, there's an honesty and a reverence to this character that I think Marissa Tomei brings to it, and I think that helps with it, because that helps with, these characters being, this is who we are. There's no shame in it. We're just different than this area. We're just different than this part of the country. There is nothing inherently worse or better. We're just different. And it's also an interesting way of saying, okay, yes, maybe she worked in her father's garage as a mechanic. Maybe she comes from a family of mechanics, which in our culture, we do tend to have this skewed mentality about validity of professions based on blue collar versus white collar. Even though if you look at salaries of blue collar jobs, they can be comparable. And you don't necessarily you can live your entire life and never need an advertising executive. You'll always need a mechanic. You'll always need an HVAC guy. You'll always need your garbage removed. So it's a very skewed perception, in my opinion. And when you compare her testimony with the testimony of the expert, whose job is also to know a lot about cars, but he doesn't have the Brooklyn accent. He's wearing a suit. He seems like he's the more professional, but she's the more knowledgeable. And so there's a lot being said between the lines with this character. And she's the reason you're watching this movie.
I 100% agree. And that is probably why my grandmother wanted me to watch this way back in the 90s when she brought it over from England and was like, you have to watch this. And she recorded it for me because, grandma being grandma, wherever she is, I'm sure she's looking down, smiling on us. But that said, I often jokingly like to say that what us Italians exported to the US was great food, proficient sex, and the mob. Because as you hear the name Gambini, you think, of course, the notorious Gambino family, where John Gotti of said family was holding court during the time this film was made. And sadly, the family is still active in New York with Lorenzo Mannino. That aside, these two are really the engine of the film. Vinny is one of those comedy protagonists who work because the movie never fully protects him. He's not introduced as polished or admired or obviously in control. He walks into situations underprepared, gets frustrated, overestimates himself, and has to adapt constantly. What I think makes him likable isn't that he's effortlessly clever, it's that he keeps engaging instead of folding. And there's also, I think, something satisfying about how practical his intelligence is, because he notices details. He pushes back when things don't make sense. He doesn't fit the image of authority people expect. And the film gets a lot of mileage out of that tension. It's partly a comedy about someone being underestimated and partly about earning legitimacy rather than arriving with it. And then, yes, there's Mona Lisa Vito, who I think is one of the reasons the movie aged as well as it did. She could easily have been written as just the funny partner or the supportive girlfriend, but she isn't. She's sharp and observant and confident in what she knows and completely uninterested in pretending the expertise she doesn't have. The film, I think, gives her a kind of specificity that makes her memorable. Her confidence doesn't come from performing importance. She simply knows things and says them plainly. What I especially like is their dynamic together. They argue, they tease, they get annoyed with each other, and sometimes seem slightly incompatible in the moment, but there is an underlying respect that keeps the relationship from becoming mean. They feel like two people who understand each other's rhythms, even while driving each other crazy. And I think one of the film's nicest choices is that it doesn't treat competence as belonging to one person alone. Their strengths are different, and the story lets both matter. And I think that gives their relationship a feeling of partnership instead of hierarchy, which is part of why people still talk about them decades later. Heck, when I was out for dinner with my mates, I was telling them we're going to be reviewing My Cousin Vinny. There was an uproar. Everyone was like, oh, wow, I remember that movie. Of course, Vinny and Mona Lisa. So everybody was all over it. So you could still see how popular it is today. So let's round off our characters with our judge and prosecutor. We have the aforementioned Fred Gwynne as Judge Chamberlain Holler and Lane Smith as Jim Trotter III. So, Noelle, starting with you, your thoughts on our judge and our prosecutor.
Yeah, well, very quickly, I just want to add one other quick thing about Mona Lisa that Zan said about her want. And it's so true that she has this want to get married, but it's rooted in him winning, because he says when he wins his first case, he's gonna, they'll get married. And so she wants him to win. And I mean, you brought out the nerd in me, Zan. I'm gonna go back and I like to do analysis of a character's want all the way through and the tent poles. And I just feel like this movie just as easily could have been called, Mona Lisa. But I digress. The judge and the Jim, the two J's, much like was already said. Hold on, I'm pulling up my little cheat sheet here. Fred Gwynne, of course. I also grew up watching reruns of The Munsters. And he's so endearing. I mean, to this day, before I even rewatched the movie, there's a few lines that will forever be embedded in my head. One, of course, is her biological clock. One, of course, is I killed the clerk. I killed the clerk. And of course, the other is, I'm sorry, two Utes, which I just think everyone knows that line. And what's so, I don't know, charming about what he brings to this film is again, it's a testament to the writing and the directing and just how great he is in the comfortability of knowing that this character lives in a particular world and this is how we do things, and you're going to play by my rules. And he's very judge-like. He's very, he fits the role well, pun intended, in that you come into a courtroom and this is how you do things. And there are moments when you think he's going to agree, and then he says overruled, and he's so expressive that I could watch him in this part for forever. I mean, I tried to watch the movie again, but Hulu changed their thing, and now they want to charge me $8 million to watch it with some other subscription. So I didn't get to go back and rewatch it the way I wanted to. But I was looking up some of his key scenes on YouTube, and so many moments when you think he's gonna go off the rails and he doesn't. He's just so cool and he's so collected and he never gets loud. The same can be said for Jim Trotter the third. They both have like this cool confidence. I'm sure, Jim even more so, especially when he takes him hunting. And that brings me back to another one of my favorite lines that I forgot to mention when we were talking about Mona Lisa, which is when they're going hunting. And Joe Pesci, Vinny wants to know, what do you think of these pants? And I wrote it down. She has a line about, you're going to shoot a deer. The deer doesn't care what pants you have on. Like, can we just be real for a moment here? And there's something so unexpected with the character, with Jim's character, in that he does sort of let the line go a little. Now, I bet he's banking on Vinny hanging himself with it, right? But he does like let it out. He does like take him hunting. He does offer all of the records, even though, Mona Lisa divulges after that he's supposed to do that. And then, but then when he also offers his cabin, which to me is then hilarious when you think like, oh my gosh, they're going to finally get a good night's sleep. And no, they end up sleeping in the car, which is even more brilliant when we come to the ending. And again, another point where something that's set up pays off in the end, with the mud and the tires. But I think, you know, for a character who from the moment we meet him is just sort of so confident and so cool and so like, you know, out for blood in that he's just convinced that these two young guys are going to hang. And then by the end to see them all, you know, just be like, yeah, uh-huh. Yeah, we were wrong. Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, it's, you know, your glasses are dirty and you need a new prescription and your windows are dirty and your grits were definitely cooking for more than 5 minutes. Um, and oh, I did do some of your work for you, you know, when he does get the, you know, the police chief to look something up for him reluctantly. And then everyone at the end just comes back together, you know, all rooted in Jim. And it seems very fast to me, like rewatching it. It seemed really fast when he was like, "Yeah, we're dropping all the charges," you know. And it's like, no, it's so fast, it's over, it's done, and then it's not because you know Vinny's still running from the judge, who you think you know that's it, that's gonna ruin it all is when the judge comes up to him and finds out the truth about who he is, and then yet again we are surprised in that beautiful moment. And it's endearing, and you're almost like, oh, if this was like a TV show, I could see Vinny and the judge having like a spin-off here because they actually would get along and they would be the odd couple. And it would be the perfect segue. But yeah, I mean, I think, you know, to this day, you know, may he rest in peace. You know, it was a hard day when we lost our incredible sorry his hold on, I need my cheat sheet. When I get nervous, names go right out of my head. When we lost Fred Gwynn. And so yeah, two Utes will forever, ever, ever, and ever be one of my most favorite lines. And I'm pretty willing to bet that Fred did not think at the end of his career that that would be a line that he would be known for. Based on his incredible repertoire.
I definitely agree. And I will say, Rob Zombie, I love you, but what you did with the monsters, not good. So Zan, starting going on to you, what did you make of our judge and our prosecutor?
Yeah, agree. But then, you know, I'm more of an Addams Family girl than I was a Munsters girl, but still, Munsters have their, you know, they have their moments.
And I know that you're more of a white zombie girl than a Rob Zombie girl.
Correct. Yes, I am. No, one of the ironies I love about this movie is that Fred Gwynn is Irish Catholic from New York, and he's playing the Southern judge. That's adorable. Like I said, the thing I liked about these two characters is that they could have been, you know, the judge. I'll start with the judge first of all. The judge is, you know, both of these characters are an imminent threat to our protagonists, you know, either the kids on trial or Vinny himself. And the judge is more of an imminent threat to Vinny because, first of all, he has to be approved by the judge as an out-of-state lawyer. And, you know, that's why he starts lying to the judge about his, you know, win some, lose some, his trial experience, because he has none. And the odds of him being approved as a lawyer with having no trial experience is very low. So, and you have him saying the things like, you know, I require some things in my courtroom, you know, a certain respect, a certain level of carrying yourself, all of those things. And, you know, we have the, you know, I'm going to hold you in contempt, and the constant contempt for either speaking or not knowing when to speak, or even just the clothing he's wearing. You start to think that this is going to be a typical corrupt Southern judge that we've seen in movies before. And you wind up thinking the same thing about Jim Trotter III, because, you know, first of all, they seem so ready to believe what the sheriff has told them, which we know is ridiculous. That is a communication problem. That is not evidence. And, you know, all of this circumstantial evidence that these two people, you know, our judge and our district attorney, are so willing to believe and so ready to believe and so ready to pin on these kids. Because again, it's more about conviction than it is about justice. We have that trope, but these guys turn out to be decent guys. That the contempt charges are not being handed down as a way to sabotage the defense. It's more in a way of it's more of catalyst to get the defense to figure out what he's supposed to be doing in court, because that's the problem. He doesn't know what he's doing. So when he's talking out of turn and saying the wrong things at the wrong time, if he doesn't have these contempt charges, he's kind of not going to learn what he needs to do differently. So we learn pretty quickly that the judge is not there to sabotage him. The judge is there to be sort of comedically threatening in that sense of, who are you? I made some phone calls. And this is back in the day where you do have to make phone calls and faxes. There's no Googling this guy's name. Okay. It's very different. If he had Googled a different name, he would have figured something out. And I do love that scene. Yeah, Judge Gallo, I heard a lot about him in the papers. Yeah, you didn't read him, did you? Because he's dead. So again, Mona Lisa figuring stuff out. But so I kind of like that, because like I said, this movie could have very easily devolved into making fun of New Yorkers and making fun of Southerners, which is those are both tropes that we see a lot in American storytelling. And they're very facile, if you ask me. The South is an easy target for the North, and the North is an easy target for the South. So the fact that these were two decent guys was kind of nice, that they are used to, when he's saying that, you may think that we're backwards down here, but we have a system of justice that's beyond compare. And you're like, do you though? Do you really? Because your sheriff is kind of an idiot, and just way too quick to assume, okay, well, these guys are from out of town, they must have done it. Like I said, it's just like in The Heat of the Night. He goes to the bus station, he sees a black guy there, he's like, all right, I found him. Like, what? Okay. Like he's a murderer because he's waiting for a bus? Like, the hell is wrong with you here? And I think because we have that cinematic history, we are able to sort of follow along with that trope, but it's more respectful than I think than it could have been. And I think that's great, because with Jim Trotter III, he really does sort of seem like he needs to be wearing like one of those 3-piece white suits, like the old-timey Southern lawyer. The one I always go back to is the genetically engineered bird lawyer from Futurama, but he's still wearing like the Colonel Sanders suit. It's incredible. I'm sorry, I thought you was corn. But that trope, he could have very, very easily been that trope. And when you hear him talking about how he had been a defense attorney, but he realized that he was defending like guilty people. And we all know that private practice attorneys, that's where the money is. The money is not being in the district attorney's office. So I think that is supposed to say something about his character, that he is more interested in winning than he is in making money. And so that makes you wonder about him. Are you more interested in winning in the sense that you are making justice happen? Or are you more interested in your conviction numbers? Because it starts out that the conviction numbers are the most important thing, because otherwise you'd think they would be like, wait a minute, all you did was steal a can of tuna? Well, what's the heck with these other guys? And what are the astronomical odds of 2 cars being made by GM, both being available in metallic mint green, committing a crime at that particular convenience store within an hour of each other? Like, that is unreal. And so you kind of get it, but you also are like, you guys are not listening. These are very, because we know the story, these are very obviously not the guys. And so, Jim Trotter III, like I said, he really seems like he's interested in the conviction more than the justice. And you start to worry. You're like, wait a minute, you're going to go hunting with this guy? Like, is he going to kill you? Like, okay, so he says you can stay at his cabin. Is that because he wants you to be late for court? Like, he knows you're going to get stuck in the mud? You kind of don't know. But at the end of the day, he's kind of a decent guy too. He's able to see the evidence in front of him. And especially because you also start to think, you have all of these back and forth moments with him where, you have them interviewing the jury, and he's interviewing that one juror saying, I think it should be left up to the victim's family. Well, what if this happens? Fry them. The prosecution approves this juror. You know, he seems like he's very biased and very happy with the bias. But at the same time, when Mona Lisa gives her credentials, he's like, okay, she's an acceptable witness. Like, he understands that this is going to be worthwhile. He can't argue his way out of her knowing the facts, essentially. So he's nowhere near as bad of a guy as I think we as an audience are expecting him to be. And I think that was a clever way of doing it, because, like I said, we are expecting the corrupt Southern lawyer. The fact that it's January, we don't have fans in the courtroom. That'd be the only other Southern courtroom trope that I think we would have, is everybody with fanning themselves in the courtroom because it's so hot. But, you know, we're expecting this sort of corrupt prosecutor, I don't know how they do things up in New York, but here that sort of, you're expecting that kind of thing. And you sort of get it, but then you realize at the end, like, no, this guy probably actually did switch over to the prosecutor's office to put away the criminals he was defending because he didn't like defending criminals. Yeah, maybe he has a better winning rate, but it's because he knew the people he was defending were guilty. And so he's a little bit more okay with being a prosecutor at that point. And, and just even the way he talks to Vinny, like, he just sees that they're both lawyers. It's nice to have the competition. They're both lawyers. And, yeah, I liked that these guys were both nowhere near as bad as the tropes that they seem to be following allowed them to be. And, like I said, I really don't think that Vinny would have gotten away with this in real life, but I'm glad he does.
I think we're all very happy that he does get away with it for sure. And like you were saying, Zan, that is definitely a big thank you to Lisa because of that reason. And Rachel, what did you make of our judge and our prosecutor?
Yeah. What's funny is the judge has a Yale, his degree is from Yale, and Frank Gwynn went to Harvard. Because of the Ivy Leagues, they are rivals. Yeah, it does. I think the fact that they wanted this to be accurate as far as the legal side of it is what kept it from getting tropey, where they could have really leaned into the hard ass Southern judge who, I mean, he did find Vinny, in contempt a number of times, but. In Vinny's case, it's like, finally, I get a good night's sleep. I don't think he was too concerned about it. But, when Vinny tried to, he explained the suit thing, and the judge was all like, okay, you got a point, and even by it's funny because, he gives Vinny that book, because he wants him to be familiar with, the rule of the law there, because the rules, the laws and statutes and stuff can vary from state to state. Even if Vinny was a seasoned trial lawyer, he would only be seasoned in New York and be familiar with New York law. The thing is, I found this really interesting. The thing is, he essentially gave him a week, a couple of days, a weekend to try and familiarize with himself with just, with Alabama law. Alabama's constitution is one of the longest ones in the United States. It is over 300,000 words long. In comparison, the U.S. Constitution is slightly over 4,000 words long. So Vinny was not going to be, unless he had a photographic memory. There was no way he was going to be able to. But I mean, for the sake of the movie, they truncated everything anyway, and condensed it for time. But it is kind of funny. It's like, here, familiarize with yourself with our laws. It's like, yeah, it would be the state where it has one of the longest constitutions in the country. But I'm back out of going to law school. Not for me. But I love how by the time we get to the kind of big scene at the end with Mona Lisa's expert testimony and everything, and our prosecutor is, after trying to discredit her as an expert, has to admit there's like, no, she's acceptable, which is only fair considering he did try to bring in his own expert without any pre-disclosure, which is highly illegal. You're not supposed to do that. Surprisingly, this, unless there's very extreme extenuating circumstances where there was just no way to let like the other side know. But in general, you have to let them know, which Vinny makes that argument. Mona Lisa is explaining all these things about the cars and the positive attraction and all that fun stuff, and it went whoever it is was all like, I think Vinny asked Mona Lisa, or Mona Lisa asked Vinny, she's like, would you like me to explain this to you? And Vinny was like, absolutely. And the judge is like, I would like to hear it too. He's just like, so am I. You've got my attention. And that's one of those like little moments that it strikes me as funny every time I see that particular bit. And then you've got your prosecutor, which again, he easily could have been more of a snake in the grass, playing dirty tricks, playing the small town, everybody knows everybody, pulling favors because, somebody did something for him once. And in small towns like that, you don't want to make any enemies because, again, everybody knows everything. But he doesn't do any of that, which, again, keeps it from getting tropey and makes it much more realistic while still being interesting. That's the thing, is like you kind of do expect, somebody, especially the your judges, your whoever, if our main character is a defense attorney, then we're talking prosecution or vice versa or whatever. That sometimes the stenographer, the bailiff or whatever, that sometimes some of those characters can get a little caricaturish. But they did not do this. They did not do that in this. It is still, while the characters still have personality and have they are their own distinct person and character. They are not. They're not tropey. They're not caricatures, but they're still interesting. And it's just one of those things where it's like, as great as the cast in this is, we do have to give, I think, some kudos to both our scriptwriter and our director for creating the blueprint and sticking with that, so that we got characters like these, where this really could have just been very dry if they wanted to keep it legally accurate, but it's not, which I think is fantastic. So you got two great character actors here. I grew up on Nick at Night, so reruns of The Munsters, absolutely. That voice is unmistakable. And Lane Smith, I wasn't a diehard watcher, but I did catch the occasional episode of Lois and Clark: The New Adventures of Superman, where he played Perry White. And he was, for those of us of a certain age, he was Emilio Estevez's coach in the Mighty Ducks movie. The character Emilio Estevez plays when he was younger and in Pee Wee hockey. So, he's also a network too. Just really.
He most certainly is. And yeah, I agree. I mean, I think these two are interesting because they represent two different kinds of authority, and the film treats them differently than people often remember. You know, because our judge could have been written as a simple obstacle or, as you guys were saying, a caricature, but he's more controlled than that. He's strict and he's formal and he's visibly irritated at times and very attached to order and procedure. And a lot of the comedy, I think, comes from the clash between his expectations and the energy brought into his courtroom. But I don't think the film portrays him as unfair. If anything, he does come across as someone trying to preserve standards in an environment that keeps becoming stranger than expected. His patience has limits, and the movie minds that for humor, but underneath it, there's professionalism. And that balance, I think, matters because if he felt ridiculous, the courtroom would stop feeling real. Whereas with Jim, I think he plays a subtler role. He's polished, he's conventional, and he carries himself with the confidence of someone who belongs in that setting. What is interesting is that the film never turns him into a villain. As you guys were saying, he isn't presented as malicious or corrupt. He believes in his case, and he operates within the system as he understands it. And I think that choice gives the story more texture. You know, instead of making the conflict about good people versus bad people, it becomes partly about assumptions, appearances, and whether confidence automatically means accuracy. And together, I'd say they create one of the film's quieter ideas, as in institutions are made up of people who may be competent, sincere, and still wrong. And the movie gets a lot of comedy from personalities colliding, but underneath it, there's a pretty thoughtful view of authority. It suggests that respectability and correctness are not always the same thing, while also avoiding the easy move of portraying professionals as fools. So yes, I definitely commend the writer for doing that for sure. So let's get to how this movie ended. You know, after, of course, the cases won, Bill, Stan, the sheriff, Jim Trotter III, and the judge congratulate Vinny on his success. And as he and Lisa drive away, she reveals that she persuaded Judge Malloy to vouch for Vinny's fictitious Jerry Callow resume. The couple then resume bickering over their long-delayed wedding plans as Travis Tritt sees us out. So Zan, starting with you, what did you make of our ending?
Like I said, I love the ending because truth prevails. Well, okay, in the courtroom, truth prevails. And not only do we have the testimony of Mona Lisa about the Paz Attraction in the Pontiac Tempest versus the Buick Skylark and and the Corvette, which could never be mistaken for a Buick Skylark. That this knowledge that was so dismissed at first is what becomes truth, and truth prevails. And once the truth prevails, then we're able to say, okay, now let's bring the sheriff up here. Tell me what's been going on lately. Well, we did pull over these guys in a Pontiac Tempest with a gun that was the same caliber that killed the store manager. So yeah, we have some reasonable doubt here. And, you know, instead of this actually becoming a jury trial where we have to convince a jury that this is enough reasonable doubt, because again, our tropes have told us from things like To Kill a Mockingbird that even though you have incredibly obvious reasonable doubt, you're going to convict anyway. They just dismiss the case because there's no reason to keep this going. There's no reason to waste anyone's time, any resources. These are obviously not the guys. Everything that we just said is the most likely option is exactly what is going on, because they know that this is this bizarre 1 in a trillion coincidence of these two cars being in the same place in Wazoo, Alabama. You know, who would have thought? Well, apparently that's what happened. And so, truth prevails, and we get our happy ending. We get these two kids are no longer on death row for just driving through the South. Yeah, it watch yourself when you're driving through the highways, the small highways of America. You guys stick to the freeways if you're not gonna run into too much trouble. And Vinny wins his case. Vinny wins his case, and everybody in this town learns how to sit with the fact that they were wrong, because all of the witnesses admitted that they were wrong. That there's no way they could have cooked grits in 5 minutes. There's, she needs thicker glasses, and we need to clean the windows, and the case is dismissed. And the sheriff is like, yeah, maybe I was a little too quick with this, because here's this other thing that's going on. So truth prevails in the courtroom. And then outside of the courtroom, truth does not necessarily prevail, but good prevails. Because at the end of the day, Mona Lisa is the one making the happy ending for everybody. And so, like I said, I hope she gets a happy ending. I hope being married to Vinny is in fact what she really wants. And I'm thinking that it is, because they've been together for like 10 years, and she drove all the way down there. You notice she's driving. I think that's her car, So she drove all the way down there, from Brooklyn to Alabama takes a while. It takes a while. So that was a long trip. She goes through a lot. He's in court all day. She's there too when he's in court, And I do think that's kind of funny when she takes the stand. It's like, do you two know each other? Yeah. What do you think? The two people in town with a Brooklyn accent might possibly know each other? Would you just stay up all night working on that one, Judge? Come on. But yeah, it's a cute ending. It's probably an unlikely ending, like the idea that somebody's just going to fax someone like, hey, remember that law student you had? You want to lie about him for me? That'd be great. Like, that's probably not going to happen. But it's an artistic license that I do like. And yeah, Rachel's right. Dale Launer, the director of this, has done some very funny 80s movies. He did his first movie as a writer was a movie called Ruthless People. He's only directed a couple of things, or he's only written a couple. I mean, the writer he's written a few movies, but he did Ruthless People, Blind Date, Dirty Rotten Scoundrels, and My Cousin Vinny, like all one after the other. And those are not all particularly critically acclaimed, but they all have like a cult following around them. Blind Date is a ridiculous movie, but it's hilarious. It's just totally ridiculous. So he does some Dirty Rotten Scoundrels, also totally ridiculous, but very, very fun. And the only thing I'm going to say about Jonathan Lynn, the director, is he directed Clue. Okay. End of story. End of credentials. This guy knows what he's doing. So, we have good people making this movie. And so even though, like I said, the end is a little bit far-fetched with the, some lawyer is going to lie for another lawyer in this sense, I guess. I mean, I guess that's another trope, is that lawyers lie for each other all the time. But in this sense, it just doesn't seem particularly like it would happen. But that also shows you, I think, what Vinny meant to this lawyer, and Vinny having people in his life who supported him. It just reinforces that if you have somebody that supports you, you can do a lot of things. And so, like I said, I really hope that as we drive off into the sunset, that what Mona Lisa wants is what she's going to get, because she deserves the happiest ending of everybody's endings of this movie.
100%. And yes, thank you, Judge Malloy, for helping, for coming out when it came to helping Vinny out indeed. And Rachel, what did you make of how our film ended?
It's a fantastic ending. I mean, after Mona Lisa's just absolutely amazing testimony, and then having the FBI guy be like, yeah, actually, she's completely right, and totally invalidates everything he said. I mean, there's no point in the trial to continue. You dismiss the charges and you let them go. And oh, by the way, just so happens we may have found the guys that actually did it, but that's not important, because the movie is about Vinny, and it's not like he's gonna defend those guys. He's only there because it's his cousin. And yeah, thankfully the one professor is willing to vouch for Vinny, and well, hopefully, because all these strange people from New York are gonna leave and probably never cast their shadow on this town ever again, that it won't matter that it might come out that essentially Vinny was practicing illegally. But it is what it is. And now he and Mona Lisa can go and get married, and all that fun stuff. So, I mean, everybody wins. It's a happy ending without being schlocky, without it's not there's no need for big pomp and circumstance. This isn't like the trial of the century or something. Although this is probably the most excitement this town has probably seen in a hot minute. Uh, but yeah, I mean, it's a great ending. I mean, even Dale, the scriptwriter, said, yeah, the movie does end without any sort of identification or conviction of the guys that actually did it, but he's like, it's not really important for this particular story, and I agree with him.
I definitely think so. I think that's probably the least important thing of this film, but very well said. And Noelle, I will say this. I won't disclose the film you originally chose, because who knows, you might decide to discuss that one next time you return. But being a country-based movie that you originally picked, and here we have Travis Tritt seeing us out, I will say I was smiling, because I'm like, I wonder whether she chose this one for some of the country music that is featured in that, but that did not turn out to be the case. But getting to your thoughts on the ending.
Listen, I married a guy from Virginia, which is it's southern enough. And I think we've been married over almost 20 years, and the photographer at our wedding did this little write-up, and I think he titled it A Little Bit Country and a Little Bit Brooklyn. And I think that just totally suits my personality. I, much like you, when I saw this movie, when it came out, had never had grits. Didn't really understand grits until many years later when I went on a road trip from New York to Florida and stopped at my first Cracker Barrel. And that is where I had grits. And they're probably, at the time, this was years ago, they're probably instant grits. I've since had much better grits. And grits are my favorite. And so, yes, I think part of me subconsciously knew that there was a country connection to this very Brooklyn country film, and it makes me very happy. And I do love the ending. I think, to everyone's beautiful points already, it never bothered me that we don't actually see who did it. I mean, the point is to get these guys off, right? It could have been, nobody did it. I mean, not that that's the case, but that wasn't the point. The point is Vinny wins the case. They do not go to the chair. Their lives are no longer on the line. And yeah, I thought it was a really sweet. I thought it all wrapped up really quickly in regards to the uh once all the facts about the car stated, how the other attorney is just like, yes, we're dropping all the charges, and it's like, yay, uproar in the court, and they're done and they're happy. And then we know he's speeding out of there because the judge has finally figured out who he is, and you're waiting for that shoe to drop, and then it doesn't. And I think the true payoff is a testament to this whole film, with Vinny and Mona Lisa being the perfect duo, is in the car when they're driving off. And of course, he says, "Ugh, you helped me. I really wanted to win this without anybody's help." And her line, "Oh my God, what a fucking nightmare that someone helped you, you know?" And that is just like the core of their entire relationship. He is gonna want to be manly and want to do everything himself, and she is gonna be there to it's almost like for those of us who watched Uncle Gadget as kids, she's like the Penny to his Uncle Gadget, right? He's like in charge and doing all the good stuff, but she's really behind the scenes cleaning up the mess and giving him the pictures that he needs and the rule book that he needs. And I also love that there's one, final callback to the runner of everything that went wrong for them with their sleeping arrangements as they're driving off into the sunset. And they're talking about, he's like, what? You always want me to be spontaneous. I'm being spontaneous. Let's go get married right now. And she says to him, a burp is spontaneous. A burp is not romantic. And she's going to get what she wants. I see it. I see it happening. I also really like to look at like first image, last image of movies. And I love that the first image is like these two young guys, kind of clueless in their car driving up. And the last image are these two perfectly matched, almost in a way, old souls who are driving off to start their life. And start this chapter of their life. They've been together so long, but now, they've crested this hill and this hurdle in their relationship. And I mean, I love a happy ending. I mean, I'm so cheesy that way. I love happy endings, and it's a comedy. It has to have a happy ending. So I was glad it delivered. Yeah, and I just love her. Oh my God, what a fucking nightmare. Someone actually helped you, but perfect to the end. Yeah.
100%. And it seems like you're not the only one, Noel, who married a man from Old Dominion, as Zan is also married, of course, to a Virginia man. So there you go. So I guess clearly those Virginia guys have something going for them. That said,
they have their moments. Yeah. Does what's funny? Where is yours from? Is he from Northern Virginia or Southern Virginia?
So for the first 13 years of his life, he was from the Norfolk Chesapeake area, and then they moved to the other end of the state, like almost to Tennessee, and that's where his family. Yeah.
Mine is from Northern Virginia, and he will absolutely tell you that. Because you'll say, where's Chris from? Virginia? Oh, well, Northern Virginia. It's like, honey, we're in the actual North. We still think you're from the South. I don't care what part of Northern Virginia you're from. You're still Southern.
Funny.
Indeed.
Love it.
Indeed. Well, somebody who, from somebody who has many a friend from Virginia and works with quite a few country artists from Virginia, I can attest that beautiful people have come from there. That said, when it comes to this ending, I think it lands because it doesn't feel like a sudden shift in genre so much as the release of tension that's been building in a very controlled way. By the time it arrives, the film has already done something very careful. It's trained you to doubt surface impressions, not just in the case itself, but in how people present themselves, how confidence can be mistaken for truth, and how authority can look solid even when it's leaning on assumptions. So when the final turn happens in the courtroom, it doesn't feel like a trick. It feels like the last piece of a structure snapping into place. And the details that were introduced earlier stop being background noise and become decisive. And that's one of the reasons it works so well, because it respects the audience enough to let earlier information matter later, as you were alluding to, Noel. And I think what also stands out is how restrained it is emotionally. There's celebration, but it's not inflated. The resolution doesn't turn everything into triumphalism. It's more like pressure finally being released after a long period of improvisation under stress. And the tone stays consistent with what came before, which is part of why it feels satisfying rather than manipulative. And then there's the quieter ending note. The characters don't suddenly transform into completely different people. Vinny and Lisa don't become idealized versions of themselves. They just look like people who survived something stressful, learned from it, and are still themselves afterward. And that matters because it keeps the story grounded even after a big courtroom conclusion. So overall, I think it's an ending that works because it pays off logic rather than spectacle. It trusts setup, detail, and patience more than surprise for its own sake. And yes, it's a fantastic ending. And yes, I love Travis Tritt. So getting to, if we were the Academy segment, As we mentioned, of course, Marisa Tomei took home Best Supporting Actress, and outside of that, the film was not nominated for anything else at the 65th Academy Awards, where the films with the most nominations were Unforgiven, talking about the South, which also won Best Picture, and Howard's End. Both films had 9 nominations apiece. So, Rachel, starting with you, do you think this film should have been nominated in other categories, and could it have won, and why do you think it was overlooked elsewhere?
Yes, and it's a comedy at the end of the day. Yeah, it's pretty sure I covered most of this when we talked about Unforgiven. Totally not my cup of tea. Totally the Academy's cup of tea, though. Not my cup of tea. It's just, I mean, this is, should, at the very least, it should have gotten recognition in, screenplay. I think Joe Pesci deserves some recognition in this as well, although he just won the year before for Goodfellas. So I could almost see the Academy being like, 2 years in a row. He still could have been nominated. He didn't necessarily have to win. Obviously, I think Marisa Tomei earned every inch of her Oscar. Which apparently she misplaced at one point when she moved, but thankfully she found it. I don't know if the Academy is still in the habit of replacing Oscars if they go missing for people. I would have given this Best Picture, but it's not going to because it's too comedic. Even though it's kind of it's a comedy drama, it's a dramedy. It's not a black comedy though, because it's not dark necessarily, but it's still too funny to get the recognition that I think it deserves, which is exactly why the Academy did not give it the recognition it deserves. I think Marissa won because her performance wasn't just funny, but she was very sincere. She has moments that are funny, but because they avoided caricature with these characters, she ends up coming off as a very layered and well-rounded character. And the command that she has during that scene when she's on the witness stand was just so you can't help but be drawn in and just be like you don't have to I know basic car maintenance. I know enough to keep my car running based on what I'm capable of, and then I let smarter people do the more complicated stuff. But even I'm like, I don't really know anything about cars, but she's just so, and again, because this was written by someone who was a car guy, he made sure it was correct as far as everything technical about all the vehicles that get mentioned in the script, that you're just all like, I absolutely believe what she's saying is fact. You got your prosecutors like, we need to know if she's stating an opinion or fact, and she's like, it's a fact. I'm like, yeah, absolutely, yeah. Facts are facts. It's like all you got to do is look at the vehicles. Which one has which one has positive traction, which one doesn't, which one has this type of axle, which one doesn't. The way cars are built, there's not really wiggle room. It either has the feature or it doesn't. It's a serious scene, but it's not To Kill a Mockingbird. It's not A Few Good Men. It's not 12 Angry Men type scene. It's just somebody who knows what the hell they're talking about, and everyone doesn't really have a choice but to pay attention and take in what they're saying and be like, absolutely, I believe everything you're saying because you're saying it with such authority behind it. And I think that's why she won the Oscar. But the film as a whole it just has too many comedic bits. The sarcastic remarks, the Vinny falling down and getting covered in mud and getting the car stuck in the mud, and his comments about cholesterol and all sorts of things. So it's like, it's just not the type of movie that the Academy is going to hand out a Best Picture statue to, unfortunately. But I would have if it had been my choice.
Fair enough. And Noelle, you being an active member within the film industry as a director, as a writer, and actress, do you think this film should have been nominated in other categories? Could it have won? And why do you think it was overlooked?
It's interesting. Well, yes, I think it's very clear. I believe it should have been nominated for Best Costumes. I think it was a total loss. But, I was talking to my husband about this last night in the car because something that most people have little to no knowledge of, even myself working in this business, is like the kind of campaigning that goes into winning an Oscar. And it's interesting. I was just looking up I was looking up that year, 93, and talk about heavy hitters. Like we're looking at a year that gave us Unforgiven and A Few Good Men and Scent of a Woman and Howard's End, and very, very serious films. I mean, I think, Marissa's nomination and this film is the only comedy, is the only, I mean, it's its only nom. And it's the only one of its kind all throughout. And then it made me think of just this past year, where Amy Madigan won for Weapons, and she was the only person nominated for that film. And she had mentioned going on, there's like a campaign, if you will, a campaign trail for the Oscar noms, and she was the only one from her film because they didn't have a budget, they couldn't afford it. And they sent her, and I, if I ever meet Marissa someday, when I meet Marissa, I'll have to ask her about what that was like for her. But, I guess the sucker in me that loves a happy ending also really, really deep down wants to believe that good things will shine through and rise to the top. And her performance was just incredible. And I don't know comparatively in that year. I mean, I also don't know what was snubbed. Just looking at the list. I can't think of another feel-good movie that's won an Oscar outside of like, what was it? Shakespeare in Love. The Oscars don't like us to feel good. They don't like us to feel good. They just do not. But once in a while, every once in a while, they will be like, okay, fine, you can feel good for this moment, but then we're moving on. And I think we've had that with this, and we had it with like, Judi Dench when they snubbed her for whatever they snubbed her for the one year. And so then they had to give it to her for Shakespeare in Love for her one scene. And they often backpedal. So while I think in a lot of ways it didn't win the gold statue, but it won the gold heart, because we as audience members, like you said, you're with your buddies drinking and told them what we were talking about, and everybody knows this movie, so it doesn't matter that it didn't win the gold. It won the box office, it won everything else. It's one that we still quote. It's one that was fun. It's one that we can go back to. It's one that's actually aging well. I mean, it still has moments of like timing, showing the timeliness of the decades. And it wouldn't work today, to your point of the internet and being able to look someone up and seeing if they've really done what they said they've done. But it works. I'm not bitter that it wasn't nominated for anything else except Best Costumes. But I am really, really glad that if there was one person in the whole thing, one category that could take it home, it was her. Even though her speech was anticlimactic. I got to talk to her about that too. I'm like, what? Did you get nervous? What happened? You were so funny in this brilliant movie, and then your speech just kind of was like, But I don't know. I'm gonna have to ask her about that and call her out on it and see if she could have a redo. You get to redo it right now. Um, I'd love her. I'd love for the girl from Brooklyn to have a redo on her Oscar acceptance speech. Yeah.
I absolutely love that. And yes, indeed, I am, I think you and Marissa will have a lot to talk about when the two of you eventually meet. And Zan, do you think that this film should have been nominated in other categories and could it have won something?
I always assumed she was in shock. If you remember the year that Juliette Binoche won for The English Patient, she got up there and her first thing she said was, "I have no idea what to say. I didn't think I was going to win. I thought for sure it was going to be Lauren Bacall." And she's like, "I don't even know what I'm doing here," which I thought
even Robin Williams was stumped when he won his Oscar. His first one.
Yeah.
This may be the one time I'm speechless, was what he said. He's like, what am I doing up here?
Do you remember when Anna Paquin won and she was like, and then she pulled it together.
Like
she was like, "I'd like to thank the Academy." And she, like, my mother was like, "Oh, she did it. She saved it."
She saved it, but she's up there like, "I am 12 years old. What the fuck am I doing here?"
Exactly. Yeah.
It was, but yeah, I always love it when they're just totally shocked by their winning. Like they just sort of look like, "What just was that my name? Like what just happened?" And so I always assumed she was just sort of in shock because again, the Oscar trope of the serious movie, the costume drama, the established actress. I mean, Marissa Tomei knows as well as I do that everybody knew her as the roommate from A Different World, and here she is now winning an Oscar for playing Mona Lisa Vito, talking about pause attraction. She's like, wait, I'm in a comedy and I'm winning the Oscar? What the hell? And again, I think it's very dismissive of us culturally to be like, "Oh, it's just because Jack Palance made a mistake." First of all, that's mean to Jack Palance and, assuming dementia or whatever was being assumed with that one. And it's not like she didn't do a good job in this one. Like I said, with this one, I felt like the true competition was between her and Miranda Richardson for Damage. Joan Plowright, Judy Davis, and Vanessa Redgrave, all fantastic. I love Judy Davis. If Judy Davis was ever going to win an Oscar, it should have been for The Ref. She was incredible in that movie. Vanessa Redgrave deserves an Oscar just for being Vanessa Redgrave. She's incredible. But Miranda Richardson's performance in Damage she's kind of the audience. She's the audience's reaction of like, "What the hell is wrong with the two of you? What is wrong with you?" And when she says to Jeremy Irons, she says, "You should have killed yourself when you realized what you were doing." The audience is like, "Yeah, maybe. You guys are horrible." Like I said, if you haven't seen it, see it. Louis Malle directed it. It is an emotional roller coaster. It's not even a roller coaster. It's just a gut punch, frankly. It's a real gut punch. So I think the real competition was between the two of them. But I love that Marissa Tomei won because again, I don't feel like the Academy acknowledges comedies in general. It's seen as sort of a lesser genre, which is unfortunate. To your point, Noelle, back to comedies, I probably would have chosen Toys for costume design. I always tend to go for costume design that is less realistic. When we have, what did win was Bram Stoker's Dracula. So even though that is sort of a historical time period, it's very well-known fictional characters with very established expectations of them. So doing something different with that, I think was quite a feat. But you have Howard Zinn, Malcolm X, and Enchanted April, and we're talking period pieces. You go, you do some research about that period, you create some costumes. And yes, there's a lot more to it than that. There's a lot more to it based on color scheme and characters and how the characters interact with each other and their colors. But Toys was just so whimsically wackadoodle and such an interesting movie that I don't think we talk about enough. Toys is very, very different. So I probably would have given that to Toys just for, basic, all around creativity. And even, again, back to comedies, Death Becomes Her wins best visual effects this year. So, we have these sort of technical awards that, comedies and other genre pictures will win. Best visual effects, the three nominees were Alien 3 and Batman Returns. Like that's where those movies are going to get are going to get recognized, and I don't like that. I like when comedies are recognized, even when they're darker comedies, like something like Parasite. I like when a comedy is recognized. Yeah, I agree. Joe Pesci won the previous year, so I don't know if he would have won this year, especially against who he was up against. This what's interesting about Al Pacino's role in Scent of a Woman is it sort of became that role is what became our stereotypical image of Al Pacino, with his
Hoo-ha!
hoo-ha. Can't talk about that movie without saying hoo-ha. So it's funny that won, but Robert Downey Jr. as Chaplin was fantastic. Denzel Washington as Malcolm X was fantastic. So I don't know if he had been nominated, I don't know if he would have won. Again, Jonathan Lynn, he's done some stuff I love, but is he a Robert Altman? Not necessarily. Is he and that is the interesting thing about this year. I would not have put this necessarily as a best picture. I like this movie better than Unforgiven, but I get why Unforgiven is there. I would not have given Unforgiven the Oscar. Sorry for that repetition there. The strange thing is, I think it's bizarre that A Few Good Men is nominated for Best Picture, but Rob Reiner not for Best Director, and Robert Altman is up for The Player, but The Player's not up for Best Picture. Because I probably would have given the and I forget what we said when we did A Few Good Men, and it depends on the day you ask me, because I was absolutely shocked at how good A Few Good Men was. I had never seen it before we did it for this podcast because of my Tom Cruise thing. But I'm watching it the whole time going, damn it, this movie's good. And I would have probably given the Best Director award to Rob Reiner, and I probably still would have given the Best Picture award to The Player. The Player is also kind of a dark comedy. It's an extremely dark comedy, but I very much like The Player. It's so scathing of the Hollywood system that I could understand that it didn't particularly get a lot of notice for the Academy Awards that year. But that's probably where I would have gone with this. Even if My Cousin Vinny had been nominated for more stuff, I think the only real chance it had was Marissa Tomei. And I think she absolutely deserves it. And like I said, I hope that everybody who bought into the Jack Palance made a mistake rumor got to eat crow along with their popcorn when they watched her as the best Aunt May we've ever had.
Amen to the best Aunt May we ever had, and R.I.P. Aunt May. I mean, I was definitely very sad when that particular moment happened.
That's the saddest movie I've ever seen. Not only does Aunt May die, the entire world forgets Spider-Man. It's so sad.
It is devastating. I definitely will agree, and I still remember the silence that came into my movie theater when we were watching Spider-Man: No Way Home. That said, when it comes to this film, I do think it could have been nominated in a few other categories, and maybe in a different awards year, it probably would have been. But yeah, as you guys were saying, this edition of the Academy Awards was unusually stacked in the area where a film like My Cousin Vinny might have had a shot. For example, I'm looking at original screenplay because the script is extremely tight, as we've talked about. And what stands out isn't just the jokes, but the structure and the way legal detail is planted early and paid off later, and how exposition is disguised as comedy. In a weaker year, it could absolutely have been an original screenplay nominee. But it was up against heavyweights like The Crying Game and Unforgiven, which were also very serious cinema contenders in the Academy's eyes that year. I would also throw in editing. This is an underrated aspect of why the film works, because the rhythm of courtroom escalation, interruption, and comedic timing is very controlled. Nothing drags, and the cross-cutting between preparation, testimony, and objections is so clean. Still, the Academy tends to prioritize editing in more overtly technical or dramatic films, and yes, 92 had a lot of prestige competition. When it comes to Best Picture, I'd say it's a long shot, but it wasn't absurd. This I think is a very interesting what if moment. The film is more structurally sophisticated than it gets credit for. It's a courtroom film that doubles as a culture clash comedy and a procedural puzzle, but Best Picture tends to favor either prestige drama or film with strong, serious subject framing. And yeah, as you guys were saying, a comedy like this usually needs overwhelming critical dominance or cultural momentum, and it didn't quite have that at the time. I also think a few things worked against it. First off, it was just a comedy in Academy terms. Because at the time, especially, comedies were rarely treated as major awards vehicles unless they had dramatic weight or auteur prestige. Even smart, well-crafted ones tended to get funneled into acting categories only. Also, tone ambiguity, I think, hurt its awards positioning. Because to Rachel's point, it's not pure slapstick, but it's also not prestige drama. That in-between space is exactly where awards bodies often hesitate. It's too funny to be serious and too structured to be dismissed as lightweight. Also, I'd say it competed in a very strong year. 92 had films like, as we were saying, Unforgiven, The Crying Game, Scent of a Woman, A Few Good Men, and Howard's End dominating attention. And so in that context, a film like My Cousin Vinny reads like a sharp outlet rather than part of the awards conversation. And to Noelle's point, it was not positioned as an important film. And as we know, awards recognition often tracks campaigning and narrative. This film didn't arrive with the framing of social significance, directorial prestige, or awards season strategy. It was released more as a commercial comedy that later grew in reputation. The irony is that what's interesting in hindsight is that its reputation has arguably grown more steadily than some of the films that overshadowed it in awards season. Once again, to Noelle's point, a lot of people now see it as one of the more carefully constructed legal comedies of its era, with unusually strong attention to procedural detail and timing. So I'd say the short answer is yes, it had real arguments for more nominations, especially screenplay, but it was squeezed out by both category bias, i.e. comedy undervaluation, and a very competitive, prestige-heavy year. But we still love it. So getting to ratings, Noelle, what do you give My Cousin Vinny out of 10?
Oh my gosh, out of 10? I mean, I could watch this movie forever, so I'll be generous. I will definitely, I don't know, man, I'm gonna want to give it a 10 because I love it. Or I'll give it a 9.5 because I have the DVD. Like I don't have a DVD player anymore, but I own this movie. That is how much I love it. And Marissa Tomei, man, girl from Brooklyn, she will always be up there for me. So yeah, I'm gonna give it a 9.5.
Great stuff. Zan, what do you give this one?
I give this a solid 8. It's very good. It's I think it's better than its reputation gave it. And like I said, watching it again, and I really realized just how pivotal the Mona Lisa character is to everything in this. I really love that about, it's one more example of behind literally every good man in this movie, there is an even better woman. And I love that about this character. Yeah, so this one gets an 8 for me.
Fantastic. And Rachel, what do you give this one?
I'm giving this one a 9. I mean, this is just, it's so good. It's so rewatchable. It's so quotable. It has stood the test of time. Unlike some of the movies that got, more recognition at the Academy Awards for this particular year. I mean, this movie gets shown in law schools as an example of like good court procedure. So, when it's being used in, for as an example to be shown to future lawyers, I think that says something. So yeah, I give this a 9. This is I love this movie. I could watch it. I'd have no problem watching this, like if it was on or it was a special screening somewhere or something, I'd be like, sign me up. Can I have some grits instead of popcorn, please?
Eventually, I will try these legendary grits, but in the meantime, I'm going to give this an 8.5 out of 10. And the main reason for that is how well it balances things that usually don't sit comfortably together. It's a courtroom film that actually respects legal procedure. It's a culture clash comedy that doesn't lean on lazy stereotypes. And it's a character-driven story where the humor mostly comes from personality and situation rather than constant punchlines. As we were saying, the writing is doing more work than it looks like on the surface. A lot of what pays off in the courtroom isn't improvised or surprising in a random way. It's carefully planted earlier and allowed to resurface at exactly the right moment. And that gives the film a kind of structural satisfaction that's early to miss if you only remember it as a comedy. And of course, the performances also matter a lot. The lead performance works because it's intentionally uneven in a believable way. It never settles into movie lawyer mode, which keeps the tension alive. And the supporting performance that won the Academy Award, I think, brings a kind of clarity and control that sharpens almost every scene it's in. Without that, the film would feel looser and less precise. Where it loses a bit of ground for me is mostly range. It's very strong in its lane, but it's not trying to reach emotional or thematic depth beyond the story it's telling. That's not a flaw exactly, but it does mean it doesn't quite cross into the rare category of films that feel layered on multiple rewatch levels beyond the plot mechanics. Still, as a piece of comedy craftsmanship with real narrative discipline, it holds up extremely well. It's one of those films that understands exactly what it is and executes it with very little waste. So it's an 8.5 out of 10 for me. So getting thus to gold standard feedback this week, we have some from the ever wonderful Dave Proctor, who writes in about today's movie. And Dave says, "Hello, cinephiles." Hey, Dave. This is not one of those movies you think of when somebody says, name the top 10 movies ever made. But is a movie I've watched 10 times and will watch any time it's on. As a former police officer, this is a scenario I feared. Go investigate and do what you do, and then experts sit down and tell me I was wrong. That being said, I would absolutely love to be able to speak to any subject as solidly, confidently, and be respected by those hearing me speak as Marisa Tomei's character, Mona Lisa Vito, did. The gift of gab and a clear ability to see the trees and the forest, and both crisp and clear in my view, as they were for Vinny Gambini by a perennial favourite, Joe Pesci, is no insignificant feat either. Ralph Macchio was 30 when this was made, but could still pass for 20. I feared nothing while the fellas were in prison, because Miyagi Do Karate had this under control. Fred Gwynn was like a cold drink of water on a hot day. Herman Munster and Judd Crandall from Pet Sematary, top of the heap right there. He didn't live all that long after this movie. Sad. He was a real talent that probably was hampered by playing such an iconic character in a campy comedy from way back. Him and Adam West are probably commiserating in the afterlife. I love that image. I feel like some of the decisions the judge made in hearing the case in such a speedy manner would have opened it up for appeals if the defendants had lost. Especially time to vet the expert. Dangerous game Vinny plays with these boys' lives if he had gambled and lost. I'm sure many litigators have regrets about cases they thought they should have won handily, only to be surprised by juries, judges, and life. Looking at you, Marcia Clark and Christopher Darden. I grew up in the South. I eat grits. I eat instant grits too, because it's the most convenient and easiest to get. Grits are not even sold in the grocery store in Colorado. People act like it is redneck food, and it may be, but polenta is grits, and Vinny, a proud Italian-American, would know this. So polenta's like grits? Okay. Grits are a part of the gooey group of hot breakfasts we all eat as kids. Some eat oatmeal, yuck, or cream of wheat, holy crap, gross, or gruel or porridge. When you grind corn, it's literally the scraps left over, probably swept off the floor originally, or half dirt in the day, since corn and the others are ground between stones. The southern United States has a lot of problems for sure. Lack of sophistication for sure is one, not a lack of education. The South is certainly replete with intellectuals. They do, of course, have an abundance of common folks. Movies do like to put this up front. I'm not saying it isn't earned. What I'm saying is it doesn't underestimate an opponent just because he speaks slowly and uses a lot of corn expressions. Culture and intelligence are not the same thing. We aren't usually allowed to speak ill of other people's culture, but Southern culture seems to be an exception. The South has a reputation that can be beat up pretty easily in the light of 21st century scrutiny. I'm not going to defend it here. I will say it is wrong to paint with the biggest brush. The problem is with any culture, the most vocal is not always the best example. The movie's enjoyable, and like I said, I watch it over and over. I give it a 6 out of 10 for impact on the world of cinema as a whole. It isn't an earth-shattering must-watch, but for rewatchability, I give it a solid 9 out of 10. Well, thank you very much for that, Dave. A great feedback indeed, and definitely appreciate that.
I'm actually shocked that grits are not available in Colorado, because grits here, at least in the Midwest, especially cheesy grits or shrimp grits, are staples of hipster foodie culture. So,
or any breakfast, any place that serves breakfast, like a Denny's or a Waffle House.
Right. Yeah. the foodie, the hipster foodie thing loves grits. So I'm actually surprised about that. And Nick, polenta is a little denser, but yeah, it's essentially the same. It's the same thing.
Pastina, Nick? And I know it's American Italian.
I know pastina very well. We give that to sick children.
Right. That reminds me more of grits than anything else. Pastina.
Yeah, that's a good comparison. Yeah. My favorite quote in movies about grits comes from Muppets Take Manhattan, where they're working at the diner, and the rats, Rizzo, of course, is a waiter, and he's asking Pete, because Pete owns the restaurant, he's asking Pete what he's serving. He's like, it's grits. How many grits? How should I know how many? Count them yourself. I love that line. It's so funny because hominy sounds like how many. But yeah, hominy is that part of the corn that he was talking about. And yeah, polenta is a little denser, but same kind of concept.
I guess so. It's kind of like Millie's in South Africa, as my mother would say. But I guess then I get a point of reference, because obviously being from Milan and being from Northern Italy, I've had polenta on a regular basis.
Constantly. Yeah.
Yes, they call us polentoni. The Southern Italians call us polentoni because we literally live on polenta. So there you go. So yes, I have had my fair share of
3 tablespoons of polenta and you're full for the rest of the day. You guys understand efficiency.
We attempt to do so for sure, Zan. So, of course, dear listeners, if you want to be like the wonderful Dave and share your thoughts on the films we discuss here, you can do so by shooting an email to goldstandardoscars@gmail.com. Once again, goldstandardoscars@gmail.com. Feel free to follow us on our social media if you're not doing so already, on X as Oscars Gold, Facebook, where you can find us as Gold Standard the Oscars Podcast, and also Blue Sky, where we're also at Oscars Gold. We love hearing from you guys, and we appreciate the follow and the support. Also, if you'd like to hear us discuss your favorite movies, you can join our wonderful family of patrons on Patreon and check out what's going on there. Of course, you get to unlock our previous reviews of such films selected by our patrons, recently Finding Neverland, Ray, Captain Phillips, Sense and Sensibility, and many more. So to join our golden army, head on over to patreon.com/goldstandardoscars. And a big thank you to our wonderful patrons for their support. Speaking of which, this month, our patrons have selected The Shawshank Redemption for us to review. Also, regardless of the platform you're listening to this podcast on, be it Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Pandora, etc., be sure to rate and review us, as that keeps the algorithm stimulated and allows the little show to reach more like-minded ears like yours. Tell your friends, tell your enemies, tell your pets. We don't care. Just spread the good word. Big thank you to those who have done so. Future thank you to those who will. So, Noel, when you're not gracing us with your wonderful presence in the Gold Standard Theatre, where can folks find you on the interwebs?
You can find me at Noelle P, like pizza, or polenta, best meal of the day. Wilson, so Noelle, NoelleP Wilson. That's my handle across all the platforms, mostly on Instagram. In full disclosure, I do check the Facebook though, the Facebook, as my mother-in-law would call it. And yeah, and whatever other channel the cool kids are using, just hit me up. I'll get some kind of notification and eventually I'll find myself there. But that's where you can find me, and my website as well, noellepwilson.com. Thanks so much.
Fantastic. And folks, if you should check out all the wonderful things Noelle has going on, because believe you me, they are staggeringly amazing. And Rachel, where can folks find you?
Well, you can usually find me with the Five-ish Fangirls podcast, a weekly pop culture and entertainment podcast where we talk about all sorts of geeky and nerdy topics from the female perspective, because fangirls are real fans too. Should have a new episode up in the feeds for everybody here. Probably not long after this episode goes up. Hopefully. We can be found pretty much wherever you find podcasts and at the Five-ish Fangirls.com, where you can connect with all of our podcast-related social media accounts and our individual ones as well.
Awesome stuff, and great to have more Five-ish Fangirls content. And Zan, where can folks find you?
You can find me with our friend Charles Skaggs on our podcast Drunk Cinema, where we watch our favorite movies and enjoy our favorite adult beverages and have a conversation. And then we record that conversation for your entertainment. That can be found wherever podcasts are found. We're on a tad of a hiatus due to various things, travel, weddings, pinball, romanticy conventions, all various reasons that we are on hiatus, but we'll be back shortly. And if you'd like to find, and that's found wherever podcasts are found. If you would like to find me on social media, I would love it if you did. Your best bets would be Instagram, TikTok, and Letterboxd. And on all three, my handle is Udinax19.
Gotta love it. And when it comes to myself, folks, you can find me in my day job hosting the radio show Whiskey and Cigarettes, where we play the very best and nothing but the best of country music for you guys from Alabama to Bailey Zimmerman. And for more information about that, you can visit our website, which is whiskeyandcigarettesshow.com. Podcast-wise, if you're fans of those superhero movies and heroically tangential for those movies, you can find myself and Keith Bliss on Happiness in Darkness, the superhero movie podcast, where we do discuss any and every superhero movie under the sun and beyond. Recently, we reviewed Lucy, which I had never seen, and I'm so glad I did because Scarlett Johansson. That aside, coming up next, we are going back to the regular superhero fare as we're reviewing the animated version of All-Star Superman. So always good to talk The Man of Tomorrow. And last but certainly not least, myself and Charles Skaggs can be found on the Fandom Zone podcast, where we're currently reviewing the first and so far only season of Spider Noir. So that's definitely fun for sure from a fan of gangster and noir films. And speaking of to come on this show, next time, as our wait for the 99th Best Picture to reveal itself continues, we are going to be reviewing a film that Rachel picked, and that movie will be the 1988 John McTiernan film, Die Hard. So first off, Noelle, thank you so much for joining us today. It was a joy having you on, and we certainly look forward to having you back with us again with more of your movie selections.
Thank you so much. It was such a pleasure to be here, and I will be tuning in next week for Die Hard, as it has a very special place in my heart. So kudos. I cannot wait. Thanks. I can't wait to be back here with all of you again.
Awesome stuff. Well, Rachel and Zan, anything else you guys would like to add on our upcoming movie or anything else before we sign off?
Yippee-ki-yay, motherfuckers! By the way, that unison was not planned.
I have a code 2 at Nakatomi Plaza. Yeah.
Does it sound like I'm ordering a pizza? Yeah, I'm not even going to watch this movie. I really don't need to. I mean, I'm going to because I get to. But this is legit my favorite Christmas movie, so I have seen it.
I was just going to ask.
Dozens of times.
Movie? Yes, thank you. Okay.
I watch this every Christmas Eve. It's a
Me
double
too.
feature. This and Muppet Christmas Carol.
I watched this, and I watched this
every Christmas.
And Black Christmas and The Ref and Mixed Nuts. I watch all those Christmas Eve.
Love it.
Well, I think that, I guess, as I said, we'll definitely have a lot to talk about when it comes to this one. So, of course, dear listeners, thank you as always for listening to the show and supporting us. We will see you next time with Die Hard and on Patreon with The Shawshank Redemption. Until then, enjoy those movies. Keep that popcorn hot. Huge thank you to Noel for joining us today. Big thank you to Dave for writing in. And all around, thank you all so much for the privilege of your time. Ciao, my people.